Most of us are haunted by the same quiet question. Why does life feel so loud, so fast, so chaotic, and yet so empty? We chase goals, approval, status, and somehow we still lie awake at night, overwhelmed, unfulfilled, spinning. This internal disquiet, this sense of a void amidst the frenzy, is a universal experience. We find ourselves perpetually reaching, striving, acquiring, only to discover that the inner peace we so desperately seek remains elusive. A whisper lost in the clamor of modern existence. The rat race of contemporary society often propels us forward at a relentless pace, demanding our attention, our energy, and our emotional investment in external pursuits. Yet despite our fervor and dedication to these outward measures of success and validation, a profound sense of lack can persist. The nights become arenas for our anxious thoughts, a time when the facade of busyness falls away and we confront the undeniable truth of our inner state, a cyclical pattern of overwhelm, a pervasive feeling of unfulfillment, and a mind that refuses to settle, constantly spinning through unanswered questions. This quiet question, though often pushed aside during the daylight hours, returns with insistent clarity when the world around us falls silent. It is the essential query of human existence, an invitation to look beyond the surface and understand the deeper mechanisms at play within our lives and minds. But 2,000 years ago, one man ruled the most powerful empire in the world, and instead of chasing the noise, he sat in silence and asked himself better questions. His name was Marcus Aurelius, and what he discovered alone in a war tent, facing death, betrayal, and grief, could still change your life today. This remarkable figure, a Roman emperor at the apex of power, chose a path rarely taken by those in positions of such immense authority. While the world demanded his constant attention, imploring him to engage in the grand strategies of empire building, the political intrigues of his court, and the relentless pursuit of external dominance, Marcus Aurelius sought solitude. He actively sought moments of profound quiet, not as an escape from his duties, but as a means to engage with them more effectively and virtuously. His choice to deliberately step away from the ever-present din of imperial life, the clamor of court politics, and the sheer weight of his global responsibilities allowed him to cultivate an inner sanctuary. Within this sanctuary, he did not seek distraction or mere repose, but rather engaged in a more profound form of inquiry. He did not ask the questions of power or acquisition. Instead, he posed better questions to himself, questions of purpose, of virtue, of how to live a life of meaning and resilience amidst unyielding adversity. This practice, documented in his personal writings known as meditations, was a profound journey of self-discovery under the most arduous circumstances imaginable. Consider his reality. He penned these thoughts not from the comfort of a palace, but often alone in a war tent, at the front lines of conflict, constantly facing death, his own mortality, the mortality of his soldiers, and the devastation of plagues ravaging his empire. He contended with the bitter sting of betrayal from those he trusted and the crippling weight of grief from the loss of loved ones, including multiple children and his beloved wife. Yet it was precisely within this crucible of extreme suffering and pressure that Marcus Aurelius forged a wisdom so robust, so universal, and so pertinent that it could still change your life today. The lessons he extracted from his intense internal work are not merely acercanta academic discussions confined to the classroom. They are, in essence, a blueprint for survival. They offer practical strategies for navigating the inevitable challenges of the human experience, with grace, composure, and a steadfast commitment to one's highest self. That's not philosophy class. That's survival. That's Stoicism. This is not about abstract concepts or intellectual exercises. It is about the gritty, everyday practice of maintaining your humanity and integrity when the world pressures you to compromise. When Marcus wrote those words, he wasn't trying to be remembered by future generations or to secure a place in the annals of history. His aim was far more immediate and visceral. He was trying to hold on to his own sanity, to preserve the clarity of his mind, and to protect his own goodness, his virtue and moral compass. In the very middle of pain, the complexities of politics, and the immense pressure most of us can't even fathom, his writings were not a public performance, but a private struggle for self-preservation and self-improvement. He was engaged in an intense dialogue with his own consciousness, attempting to reconcile the harsh realities of his world with his commitment to rationality and virtue. The sheer scale of his burdens, legal, military, social, and personal, would overwhelm the average individual. He was the emperor, responsible for millions of lives, constantly facing threats both internal and external. Yet through it all, he fought to maintain his inner equilibrium. And the crazy part? What he figured out back then applies to everything we're still struggling with now. This is the profound, almost astounding truth at the heart of meditations. Despite the 2 millennia separating his time from ours, the fundamental human struggles remain strikingly similar. The issues of anxiety, frustration with others, the search for meaning, the battle against distraction and impulse. These are universal themes that transcend time and cultural context. Marcus Aurelius, a man of immense power and responsibility, grappled with the same internal conflicts that plague the modern individual, regardless of their social status or circumstances. His solutions, born from rigorous self-examination and the application of Stoic principles, offer a timeless roadmap for navigating the inevitable discomforts and complexities of life. So if you've ever felt like you're trying to hold it all together in a world that won't stop falling apart, a world characterized by relentless change, uncertainty, and apparent chaos, then this message is for you. This is not an offer of some fleeting solution or a superficial cure-all. It is not about finding a quick fix for your problems, not because Stoicism is some trendy self-help hack or a fad that will soon pass. Rather, it is because Stoicism is real, it is raw. It is authentic in its acknowledgement of human suffering and its practical approach to overcoming it. And it's built for people like us. People who are tired of being reactive to every external event, every news headline, every social media notification. People who are tired of chasing meaning in external achievements, in the approval of others, or in material possessions. These are individuals who have come to the revelation that true fulfillment and peace do not reside in outward pursuits. Instead, they are finally ready to create it, to forge their own meaning and purpose from within through intentional action and a disciplined mindset. This is a call to action for those who are ready to take ownership of their inner world and to cultivate a sense of peace and resilience that is not dependent on external circumstances. It is a philosophy for the gritty realities of life, not for a romanticized, idealized existence. Now, if that resonates with you, even just a little, if these ideas strike a chord deep within your own experience, then there's one simple, free way you can support what we're building here. This platform for sharing ancient wisdom for modern challenges. Your support, though seemingly small, means a lot more than you might think. It validates our efforts and helps us reach more individuals who are also seeking this kind of profound, practical wisdom. So if these words have touched you in any way, the simplest yet most impactful thing you can do is to hit that subscribe button. That's it. No complex steps, no financial commitment, just a click that signifies your alignment with this mission. If you're into wisdom that actually applies to real life, wisdom that isn't confined to academic discourse, but can be integrated into your daily actions and choices, then you're in the right place. This is not about theory for theory's sake, but about practical guidance for the messy realities of human existence. Let's dig into the lessons that helped an emperor stay human and can help you do the same. Let us explore the timeless insights that enabled Marcus Aurelius, a man burdened with immense power and responsibility, to maintain his virtue, composure, and compassion amidst unyielding adversity. These are the lessons that can empower you to navigate your own challenges with greater clarity, strength, and inner peace. Marcus Aurelius didn't write meditations for an audience. He wasn't hoping for fame in the public eye, for a host of followers to admire him, or a coveted spot on a bestseller list that would solidify his literary reputation. He wasn't building a brand or cultivating a public image. Rather, he was writing to himself, quietly in the solitude of his private chambers or his war tent, engaging in a deeply personal, utterly honest dialogue with his own soul. And that's exactly why it cuts deeper than most books ever could. The absence of any external motivation or the need for public approval is precisely what gives meditations its unparalleled power and authenticity. It wasn't edited for public approval, scrubbed clean of its rawness to present a polished image. It wasn't shaped to impress scholars with its eloquence or to flatter emperors with its wisdom. Instead, it was a man alone with his thoughts, engaged in a relentless, uncompromising struggle to hold himself together, to maintain his moral and mental cohesion, in a world that kept trying to pull him apart with its demands, its pressures, and its tragedies. He was wrestling with his own impulses, his frustrations, and his fears, and he did so with unflinching candor. And in that brutal honesty, we find something rare, truth that hasn't been diluted by ego. Marcus Aurelius wasn't trying to sound wise or to project an image of infallibility. His true purpose was far more humble and profound. He was trying to stay decent. He was actively engaged in the practice of reminding himself how to respond when the world disappointed him, when events did not unfold as he wished or expected. He sought to cultivate the capacity to remain calm when others lost their temper, when emotions ran high around him. He strived to hold on to virtue, his core principles of justice, courage, temperance, and wisdom. Even when it would have been easier to give in to rage, to indulge in bitterness about his fate, or to fall into the abyss of despair in the face of overwhelming challenges. This continuous, self-directed training is what makes meditations feel so alive. It doesn't talk at you from a distant pedestal of superior knowledge. Instead, it whispers with you, a confidant sharing his deepest struggles and insights. It walks alongside your worst days, offering a sense of solidarity and practical guidance that no formal lecture ever could. Understanding. It doesn't pretend things are easy or suggest a path without struggle. Rather, it just insists they're worth enduring. It acknowledges the inherent difficulty of life and reaffirms the profound value of persistence and virtue in the face of it. You read it and you don't see a marble statue of a perfect man, an unblemished figure of history. Instead, you see someone struggling, a ruler facing the devastation of plagues that wiped out vast segments of the population, leading armies through wars on multiple fronts, enduring the sharp pain of betrayals from close associates. You see a father bearing multiple children, suffering the profound anguish of losing his wife, and yet still trying to get up in the morning and act with dignity. He writes things like, "When you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive." But you know from the tone, from the raw honesty that permeates his writings, that he's probably writing that very reminder to himself precisely because he doesn't feel like getting out of bed. He's not preaching from a position of effortless wisdom. He's coaching himself, not preaching to you. He is reminding himself of the truth he needs to hear in that moment of weakness or despair, and somehow, that hits harder than all the polished advice in the world. The authenticity of his struggle gives his words an unparalleled weight and resonance. That's the strange paradox of meditations. It was never meant to be shared with the wider world, and yet that's what makes it so shareable. Its power lies in its rawness, in its unfiltered honesty. Its unpolished nature is what gives it polish in a deeper sense, a kind of enduring brilliance that cannot be replicated by carefully crafted prose. Because it's not afraid to look messy, to expose the imperfections of the human mind, it feels clean, free from the artifice of performance. Because it's not performative, not intended to impress, it's profound. You don't feel like you're reading a philosopher on a pedestal, distant and unreachable. You feel like you're reading a man sitting in a war tent, holding a pen with one hand and holding back grief with the other. You see the humanity of the struggle, and maybe that's why, after all these years, after millennia have passed, it still resonates with people from all walks of life. Because in a world addicted to appearance, to performance, to pretending to have it all figured out, Marcus shows us what it looks like to be real. He embodies a kind of authenticity that is rare and refreshing in any era, but especially in our own. He writes, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one." That line alone has outlived centuries of political theory, endless moral essays, and countless religious sermons. Not because it's perfectly worded or exceptionally eloquent, but because it's painfully honest. It cuts through the excuses and the pretense. It gets under your skin and asks, with unflinching directness, are you being the person you keep talking about becoming? It's a direct challenge to the disconnect between our aspirations and our actions, a call to align our words with our lived reality. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." This is a deeply resonant idea, suggesting that the ultimate aim of human existence is to uncover and embrace one's authentic self. But to do that, to embark on this journey of self-realization, you have to first confront the parts of yourself you'd rather hide, the shadows, the flaws, the insecurities. This confrontation is often uncomfortable, even painful, yet it is absolutely essential for genuine growth. That's what Marcus was doing in his meditations. He was not engaged in a superficial exercise of self-congratulation. Instead, he was confronting his ego, acknowledging its temptations and its impulses. He was facing his anger, the irritation and frustration that naturally arose from the challenges of his imperial duties and personal tragedies. He was confronting his fear of death, a reality that loomed large in his life given his health issues, the plagues, and the wars. He was addressing his frustration with others, the constant navigating of advisors, senators, and generals, many of whom were unreliable or malicious. And in doing so, he was doing something many of us avoid at all costs, facing the truth without flinching. He did not shy away from his own imperfections or the harsh realities of his world. This unwavering honesty is not weakness. On the contrary, it's the very essence of courage. It takes immense bravery to look inward with such rigor. And that's why Meditations endures, because it models a kind of strength that doesn't come from conquest of external enemies or territories, but from inner clarity, a profound understanding and mastery of one's own mind and emotions. It is a strength that is forged through self-awareness and discipline, a kind of power that transcends the temporary gains of battle or political triumphs. There's something deeply human about reading the words of a Roman emperor who admits he loses his temper, who, despite his exalted position, finds it necessary to remind himself not to crave applause or external validation. A man who struggles with ambition and grief, just like the rest of us, the common people he ruled. This reminds you that titles and power don't protect anyone from the human condition. They don't immunize leaders from the same inner turmoil, the same vulnerabilities, and the same heartbreaks that affect every individual. The imperator, the servant, the scholar, all are subject to the universal experiences of life and death, joy and sorrow. Aristotle said, "Knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom." Marcus took that seriously. Every page he wrote is a deliberate attempt to know himself better, not for self-indulgence, but so that he could lead better, with greater justice and compassion, so he could love better, with a deeper, more resilient affection, and ultimately so he could live better, in alignment with his highest principles. That kind of self-awareness is timeless, a necessity for anyone seeking a fulfilling and virtuous life, regardless of the era. And yet it's more than just introspection, it's discipline. Marcus was not journaling to vent his emotions in a cathartic release. He was writing to train his mind, to reinforce the mental patterns and ethical frameworks that he knew were essential for his role and his character. He was constantly working to remind himself of the kind of man he wants to be, a man of reason, virtue, and composure. That's why the book returns to the same themes again and again, almost like a litany of essential truths. He reiterates the need to control your emotions, to don't seek praise from others, to remember death as an inevitable parting, and to serve the common good with every action. These weren't philosophical decorations or elegant abstractions to be admired. They were guardrails keeping him on the straight path. They were lifelines pulling him back from the abyss of despair or tyranny. They were a code he could return to when everything else fell apart, when the world seemed to descend into chaos, his personal life was rocked by tragedy, or his leadership was challenged. This code provided a steady anchor in the storm. Plato wrote that, "The first and best victory is to conquer self." Marcus lived that battle every day. He didn't just contemplate self-mastery. He actively engaged in it through his writing. You can feel it in the repetition of his themes, the constant looping back to the same reminders. This is not because he was forgetful, but because he understood the nature of human habit and the need for continuous reinforcement. Because when life keeps hitting you with its unrelenting challenges and setbacks, you don't need a new idea or some novel philosophy. You need to remember what you already know, the fundamental truths you've internalized but may have forgotten in the heat of the moment. He was teaching himself how to stay rooted in his principles, how to keep his footing firmly planted, and how to not be swept away by the flood of chaos that comes for all of us, sooner or later. The inevitability of suffering and disorder is a given in the human condition. Marcus's writings are a testament to the power of preparation and the sustained effort required to navigate life's storms without losing one's inner compass. And this is where the magic happens. Because even though Meditations was written for one man, for Marcus Aurelius himself, as a private spiritual exercise, it ends up being for everyone. Why? The reason is profoundly simple. Because it's not trying to impress anyone with grand rhetoric or intellectual display. It's not pretending to have all the answers neatly packaged for consumption. Instead, it's a humble admission, a raw confession of his own ongoing journey. It's not afraid to say, "I'm still learning." And in that vulnerability, in that unflinching honesty about his own struggles and imperfections, we see ourselves. We recognize our own frustrations, our own fears, our own attempts to grow, our own failures to live up to our ideals, and we realize we're not alone. This realization matters deeply, because in today's world we're drowning in information, an endless stream of data, news, and opinions, but we are starving for wisdom. We scroll endlessly through feeds, consume constantly through various media, but rarely pause to reflect on what truly matters. Marcus reminds us to slow down, to think deeply, to choose our responses and actions consciously, to live on purpose, not just on autopilot, reacting mindlessly to external stimuli. Socrates once said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." But Marcus shows us what the examined life actually looks like in practice. It's not glamorous or perfectly articulated. It's not perfect or free from imperfection. Instead, it's a daily effort to stay aligned with what matters, and what mattered to Marcus beyond the pomp and circumstance of his imperial role. Not wealth or the accumulation of possessions, not legacy or how he would be remembered by posterity, not comfort or the avoidance of pain. What mattered was character, his inner moral fabric, integrity, the alignment of his words and deeds, compassion, his ability to empathize with others, resilience, his capacity to bounce back from adversity. He wasn't trying to be remembered for his conquests or his grand architectural projects. He was trying to be useful to his empire, to his people, and to himself. And that distinction between chasing attention and offering value is what separates wisdom from noise. The pursuit of external validation is often a distraction from the true work of self-improvement and service. It's easy to get swept up in modern performance culture, where the imperative is to curate your life instead of living it. We are constantly encouraged to project a perfect image, to showcase only the highlights, and to craft a narrative that aligns with societal expectations. But Marcus pulls you back to something older, something quieter, something stronger, a foundational truth about human existence that transcends the latest trends and the demands of the digital age. He reminds you that the point isn't to be liked by others or to win the approval of the crowd. Instead, it's to live in a way you respect, to conduct yourself with such integrity that you can be at peace with yourself when your head hits the pillow at the end of the day. That kind of peace can't be bought with wealth or status. It can't be faked through surface-level conformity or clever rhetoric. It has to be earned through diligent, consistent inner work. And Marcus spent his life trying to earn it, through every thought, every decision, every word he wrote in his journal. When you read his words, you're not getting advice from someone who had it all figured out from the start, a perfect sage on a mountaintop. Instead, you're getting field notes from someone who was in the mud with you, struggling through the gritty realities of life. He was fighting the same internal battles that we face, stumbling over the same temptations, and trying every day to rise a little higher in his virtue and composure. That humility is what gives the book its power. It doesn't shout with arrogant authority. It doesn't preach with self-righteousness. It just walks beside you, a quiet companion offering guidance and understanding. That's the kind of philosophy we need more of today. Not abstract theory that is distant and impractical, not academic jargon that is inaccessible to the layperson, but real, grounded wisdom that helps you handle life when it's hard. Wisdom that provides tangible tools for navigating discomfort and adversity. It's the kind of wisdom that helps you build an inner compass you can trust, a steady guide that points you toward virtue and clarity regardless of external circumstances. It's wisdom that teaches you how to act with grace when everything around you feels graceless, when the world is rife with discord and unkindness. Marcus reminds us that leadership isn't about dominance or the forceful assertion of will. It's about discipline, self-control, and consistent adherence to principle. He shows us that strength isn't about control over others or external events. It's about character, the integrity and moral fiber of the individual. And perhaps most importantly, he teaches us that peace isn't something the world gives you as a reward for external success. Instead, it's something you build from within, a sanctuary constructed brick by brick through conscious choices and self-mastery. His life, his writing, his example. They all point back to that one profound truth. The real work is always inside. The true battles and the most significant victories occur within the confines of your own mind. So when you open meditations, you're not stepping into history in the sense of reading a dry account of past events. You're stepping into a conversation, a very old, very intimate, very human conversation. It is a dialogue with a man whose struggles echo your own across millennia. And the beauty of it is that you're invited in. You don't need to be a scholar with extensive academic training. You don't need to understand Latin or ancient Greek to grasp its essence. You just need to be honest with yourself about your own imperfections, your own frustrations, and your own aspirations. And maybe that's the greatest lesson of all, that the path to wisdom isn't found in pretending to know everything or in projecting an image of infallibility. Instead, it's found in admitting where you still struggle, in the humble acknowledgement of your own limitations, and then showing up anyway, day by day, thought by thought, page by page, just like Marcus did. Because that's what being Stoic really means. It's not about shutting down your feelings or becoming emotionless, but learning how to carry them with strength, to endure emotion without being overwhelmed by it. It's not pretending you're perfect or that you've achieved some state of enlightenment, but trying to be better than you were yesterday in every moment. It's not chasing applause or external validation, but living by principle, quietly with unwavering consistency, and with profound courage. And that kind of life, it doesn't need an audience to bear witness to its greatness. It just needs your full attention and your unwavering commitment to your own virtue and growth. You don't need a take on everything. This might sound strange and counterintuitive in a world that runs on opinions, where every individual feels compelled to voice their perspective on every issue, no matter how trivial or distant, but it's true. You don't have to weigh in on every headline that screams for attention, every debate that flares up on social media, or every drama that unfolds in the public sphere. You don't need to comment, post, argue, or declare where you stand every time the world offers you a spotlight, even a fleeting one. Marcus Aurelius lived in a world full of political tension, where his authority was constantly challenged and where betrayal was a real and present danger. He navigated periods of intense war and profound social division, and even then, despite the immense pressures and the constant provocations, he knew the real power is in knowing when not to speak. It's in the disciplined application of silence and discernment. He wrote, "You always have the option of having no opinion. There is never a need to get worked up or to trouble your soul about things you can't control." This is more than just advice. It's a profound strategy for mental peace and psychological resilience. It's a form of psychological self-defense against the incessant demands of the external world. Because every time you respond to something that doesn't need your energy, something that is beyond your sphere of influence, or that is mere noise, you hand over a piece of your mind. You give away focus that could be directed toward what truly matters. You lose control of your inner world, allowing external events to dictate your emotional state. We live in a time where not reacting is treated like ignorance or indifference. Society often implies, stay silent, you must not care. Don't post your take, you must not be paying attention. There's a social imperative to engage, to have a voice, to be seen as informed and engaged. But Marcus wasn't trying to appear informed to others. His goal was far more significant. He was trying to be free. And freedom in the Stoic sense isn't about doing whatever you want without repercussion. It's about not being pulled by every passing emotion, every noise, every impulse to react. It is the liberation from slavery to one's own emotional whims and external stimuli. Think about the pressure we feel to respond to everything around us. Something goes viral, and there's this instant urge. What do I think about it? Do I agree or disagree? Am I on the right side of this? The desire to conform, to be part of the conversation, to avoid being perceived as out of touch is immense. But that pressure comes with a cost. It costs you clarity of thought. It costs you peace of mind. And more importantly, it distracts you from the only thing you can truly control, your own behavior, your own reactions, your own choices. Carl Jung once said, "Where wisdom reigns, there is no conflict between thinking and feeling." This harmony, this integration of rational thought and emotional experience, only happens when we pause long enough to observe our own mind before jumping into a reaction. Not every thought is worth expressing. Not every issue needs your take. And not every moment requires you to take a stand, especially when that stand is based more on fear of judgment than actual conviction. This isn't about apathy or a lack of concern. It's about discernment. Marcus wasn't passive in the face of world events. He was deliberate. He knew how to filter what entered his consciousness. He trained himself to recognize which things deserved his energy and which were just noise. Distractions that would pull him away from his true purpose. Because noise can feel urgent. It wants your attention, it begs for a reaction, but it rarely offers anything substantive in return. It is often a drain on your mental and emotional resources. Wisdom, on the other hand, waits. It observes the circumstances. It sees the storm unfolding, but doesn't step into it unless it's absolutely necessary. It chooses its moments. Aristotle said, "To avoid criticism, say nothing, do nothing, be nothing." But Marcus wasn't trying to avoid criticism or escape scrutiny. He just wasn't controlled by it. He didn't speak just to be heard or to gain admiration. He spoke when it served the moment, when it aligned with his principles, when silence would have been dishonest or a compromise of his values. And that's the real difference. Silence isn't weakness when it's chosen from strength, from a place of intention and inner clarity. It becomes weakness when it's used to hide from responsibility, from truth, or from necessary action. We've all had moments where someone said something wrong, something offensive, something clearly out of line. And instead of pausing, we jumped in with an immediate reaction. But later we felt exhausted, drains of energy, not because we stood up for something important, but because deep down, we knew our reaction wasn't from clarity or principle. It was from reflex, from ego, from the need to be seen as right or superior. Marcus trained himself to question that impulse to react. His aim was not to suppress his voice entirely, but to elevate his character, to respond from a place of virtue rather than instinct. And this training? It wasn't theoretical or confined to philosophical debate. He was the most powerful man in the world, constantly engaged in the gritty realities of leadership. Every day he dealt with flattery from those seeking favor, betrayal from those he trusted, immediate crises requiring swift decision-making, and manipulation from those with ulterior motives. But instead of getting caught in the whirlwind of politics and emotion, he returned again and again to the same fundamental question. Is this worth my peace? This was his anchor, his internal litmus test for every potential reaction. That question, is this worth my peace, could save you hours of stress every week. Consider the daily scenarios. You see a post online, it bothers you. It triggers a strong emotional response. You feel your fingers itching to type a hasty, angry reply. But wait, ask the question, is this argument worth your clarity? Will this comment actually bring understanding or just more division? Will it add value or simply contribute to the noise? We've been trained to think that engagement equals value, that if you're not actively responding, you're irrelevant or out of touch. But that mindset is rooted in fear. Fear of being overlooked, fear of being excluded from the conversation, fear of being wrong. Stoicism teaches us that relevance isn't about being loud or constantly asserting your opinion. It's about being centered, maintaining your inner calm and composure. When you choose not to weigh in on every issue, something unexpected and profound happens. You start noticing more. You hear what people actually mean, the underlying motivations and fears, not just the words they say. You catch the patterns behind the problems, the deeper causes rather than just the symptoms. You begin to respond from wisdom instead of emotion, from a place of calm, reasoned discernment, rather than impulsive reaction. That's not detachment or indifference, it's awareness, a heightened sensitivity to your own inner state and the world around you. It's the ability to sit in silence and listen to life, to observe, to absorb, to process, before adding your own voice to the mix. Socrates, in his commitment to self-knowledge, was famous for saying, "I know that I know nothing." That wasn't an admission of defeat or ignorance. It was liberation, a release from the ego's need to be right and to have all the answers. Because once you stop needing to appear all-knowing, you free yourself to actually learn. And real learning, genuine insight, starts with silence. That silence can feel uncomfortable at first, especially when everyone else is shouting, when the world demands your constant participation. But give it time. Let it deepen within you. Let it become your default mode. Observing first, then choosing your response. And not choosing by impulse, by mere reaction, but by value. What's truly important to you? What do you stand for? What matters when the noise fades and the frenzy subsides? Marcus wasn't trying to escape life or shield himself from its difficulties. He was trying to engage with it more wisely. He knew that the mind is like a city. It needs gates. Not every voice deserves entry into your inner citadel of thought. Not every opinion deserves attention. Not every emotion needs a reaction. And this mental gatekeeping, this choice to pause and vet what you allow into your consciousness, is what creates inner stability. It's easy to mistake silence for indifference or passivity, but the Stoics saw silence as strength. They understood that not all battles are worth fighting. Some are distractions dressed as purpose, pulling you away from your true priorities. Some are emotional traps, designed to provoke a reaction and ensnare you in anger or frustration. Some are just chaos looking for company, seeking to drag you into the mire. And if you're not careful, you become part of the noise you were trying to escape. Think about how much energy we waste trying to defend our identity, trying to explain ourselves to those who may never understand, trying to prove we're good, moral, thoughtful, smart. But here's a hard truth. The people who already believe in you don't need convincing. Their faith in you is unwavering. And the people who are committed to misunderstanding, you won't be swayed by any argument, no matter how logical or well-reasoned. So what if you stop trying to convince them? What if you let your actions be your defense? What if you let your peace speak for itself, a quiet testament to your inner strength and composure? There's a story about Plato being slandered by someone in public. A friend urged him to respond, to defend himself against the false accusations. Plato calmly replied, "I will live in such a way that no one will believe him." That's the essence of Stoicism. Integrity, not argument. Action, not opinion. Character, not clapbacks or verbal retaliation. You don't have to win every debate to be victorious. You don't have to clear up every misunderstanding to maintain your truth. Sometimes the best response is to live so clearly that people can't twist your truth or misrepresent your intentions. And that kind of clarity of purpose, of identity, of values can only grow in silence. In the quiet space where you are not reacting to external stimuli, but cultivating your inner world. The truth is, your opinion is precious. It's not meant to be tossed into every fight or expended on every frivolous discussion. It's meant to be cultivated, sharpened, deepened, so that when you do choose to speak, your words actually carry weight. They come from a place of reason, thought, and authentic conviction. And here's something you might not expect. The more you practice this discernment, the more people begin to respect you. Not because you're loud or dominant, but because you're steady. Because in a world of noise, your silence stands out. Your calm becomes a kind of authority, and your restraint becomes a kind of power, a power derived from self-mastery rather than external control. That's what Marcus was building, a quiet power, a durable peace. Not because life was easy or without its challenges, but because he refused to be a slave to his own reactions. He claimed ownership of his inner state. So the next time you feel the urge to weigh in, to jump into the debate, to prove your point, to set the record straight, pause, breathe. Ask yourself, is this noise or is this necessary? Am I being pulled or am I choosing? Because that pause might be the most stoic thing you do. It is the moment of choice, the moment of reclaiming your autonomy, and that's the real lesson here. Silence isn't the absence of a voice or a lack of opinion. It's the presence of strength. It's the space between stimulus and response, the space where your freedom lives, the space where your peace waits. So no, you don't have to weigh in. You don't have to have a take on everything. You don't need to stamp every moment with a label or an opinion. What you need is a mind that's free. Let that be your power. Let that be your peace. He wasn't pretending to be flawless or to possess some supernatural perfection. He was holding himself accountable, one mistake at a time. This is a crucial distinction. His wisdom was not static or inherited. It was forged in the fires of experience and self-examination. Most of his wisdom comes from where he fell short, from his own imperfections, his own frustrations, and his own failures to live up to his high standards. That's not weakness or a sign of inadequacy. That's exactly what growth looks like in practice. It is the recognition of error, the willingness to learn from it, and the commitment to do better. Marcus Aurelius, the Emperor of Rome, the most powerful man in the world at the time, didn't sit on a golden throne and write meditations to impress anyone with his intellectual prowess. He didn't craft it to gain followers or admirers, to boost his image in the public eye, or to secure a legacy that would enshrine his name in history books. That's what makes it so powerful. Its genuine authenticity stems from its intention. It was private, a conversation with himself. It was honest, unfiltered, and uncompromising, sometimes painfully so, revealing his deepest vulnerabilities. It was a journal, a repository of his own thoughts, a conversation with himself. And in that conversation, you don't find a man bragging about his triumphs or recounting his heroic deeds. Instead, you find a man admitting again and again where he slipped, where his emotions got the best of him, where his ego crept in, where he forgot his values in the heat of the moment. He wrote, "When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly." That's not a motivational quote designed to inspire others with positivity. That's someone coaching himself through frustration, preparing his mind for the difficulties he knows he will face. That's a leader preparing his mind not to explode in anger, not to judge others harshly, but to respond with steadiness, with composure and reason. Because Marcus knew something we often forget in our quest for external perfection. Strength doesn't come from pretending to be above the struggle or immune to its effects. It comes from being inside it and choosing not to be broken by it. It is the capacity to endure and to maintain one's integrity, despite adversity. We live in a culture obsessed with image, with curating perfection for public consumption, with projecting certainty even when uncertainty reigns. But Marcus wasn't performing for an audience. He was examining his own mind and character with rigorous honesty. In fact, many of the entries in Meditations feel like mental corrections, moments where he rebukes himself or reminds himself of a truth he had temporarily forgotten. He'll say something like, "Don't be overheard complaining, not even to yourself." That's not him judging others for their complaints. That's him checking himself, holding himself to his own high standard. That's what Stoicism demands. Not that you never fall or make mistakes, but that you're honest when you do, that you acknowledge your imperfections without self-deception. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Marcus was doing exactly that, bringing the unconscious to light, the hidden impulses, the unacknowledged frustrations, the subconscious patterns. Every frustration, every flaw, every emotional spiral was brought into the light of his awareness. He didn't bury them or pretend they didn't exist. He wrote them down. He looked at them with detached observation, and in doing so, he refused to let them own him. He took ownership of his inner world. Growth doesn't look like a highlight reel of unbroken successes and moments of glory. It looks like wrestling with your own thoughts, engaging in a constant internal battle to align yourself with virtue. It looks like waking up and realizing, I messed up yesterday, but today I'll do better. That's the real work, not climbing to some imagined mountaintop of enlightenment or achieving a state of perfect serenity, but simply staying aware, checking yourself before you go too far, catching the slip before it turns into a spiral of regret or self-defeat. Think about the last time you overreacted, said something you regretted, held on to a grudge longer than you should have. What did you do afterward? Did you blame the other person for your reaction? Did you justify it with excuses? Or did you even quietly say to yourself, that's on me? That moment right there, that tiny acknowledgement of responsibility, is what Marcus practiced every day. And that's where growth lives, not in perfection, which is unattainable, but in self-awareness, in the honest recognition of your imperfections. Aristotle wrote, "Knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom." Marcus took that literally. Every day he checked in, not with others to gauge their opinions, but with himself. He constantly asked, am I being ruled by fear, by anger, by ego? These weren't passing thoughts or occasional reflections. They were his daily practice, his form of discipline, his mirror for self-examination. And that's the difference between someone who wants to look wise and someone who becomes wise. One avoids mistakes, hides them, denies them to maintain an image. The other exposes them, examines them, learns from them to cultivate genuine wisdom. In one passage, Marcus reminds himself, if someone is able to show me that what I think or do is not right, I will happily change, for I seek the truth. That level of humility from an emperor is staggering and almost unheard of, both in his time and ours. And it's not just poetic or beautifully worded, it's powerful. Because true growth doesn't come from clinging to being right or defending your positions at all costs. It comes from being willing to change your mind when a better truth presents itself. It is the openness to new information and a commitment to reality over personal conviction. And isn't that the battle most of us fight every day? The tension between wanting to look right and actually being right? Between defending our pride and the humility required to admitting we've got more to learn? Marcus leaned into that tension. He embraced it and let it teach him. Plato once said, "The first and greatest victory is to conquer yourself." That's exactly what Marcus was attempting daily, quietly through introspection and journaling, and imperfectly because the process of self-mastery is never truly complete. He wasn't at war with armies alone. He was at war with himself, with his impulses to react hastily, his frustration with others, his need to control external events, his desire to retaliate against wrongs, and his hunger for recognition and applause. He met these internal enemies not with force or suppression, but with awareness and sometimes with surrender to the natural flow of life. That's what accountability is. Not punishment or harsh self-condemnation, not shame or the hiding of one's flaws, but presence. It is the act of owning your part in every situation, seeing yourself clearly without deception, and choosing every time to rise a little higher, to act from virtue rather than impulse. Marcus didn't celebrate himself in his writings. He corrected himself over and over again. He would write things like, "At every hour, give your full concentration. Do everything as if it were the last thing you were doing in your life." He wasn't preaching to some imagined congregation. He was reminding himself, because like all of us, he got distracted. He got emotional. He got tired. He forgot what mattered most in the grand scheme of things. And instead of hiding that vulnerability, he wrote it down. That's strength, the courage to be honest with oneself. Socrates taught that the unexamined life is not worth living. Marcus examined his, not once, not occasionally, but daily. Even as an emperor, burdened with immense responsibilities, even during wars, facing constant danger, even while grieving the loss of loved ones. That kind of consistency is rare. And that's where transformation begins, not in the moment of clarity or a sudden epiphany, but in the habit of returning to it again and again, day after day. You can feel his humanity in the pages of Meditations. There's no ego, no arrogance, just a man trying to stay centered in the chaos of power, responsibility, loss, and temptation. He faced the same struggles we do: anxiety, frustration, the desire for control, just amplified 1,000 times by the sheer scale of his imperial duties. And still, he showed up. Still, he held himself to a higher standard of virtue and composure, not because anyone was watching and expecting him to be perfect, but because he was watching himself. Think about that for a second. What if your life was being watched, not by others and their judgments, but by your future self? The version of you 5 years from now, 10 years from now, the one who's wiser, calmer, more grounded. What would they say about the way you're living today? Would they thank you for your accountability for the choices you made? Or would they be cleaning up the mess your ego left behind? That's what Marcus tapped into. He wasn't writing for applause or external recognition. He was writing for alignment, to ensure his actions and thoughts were in harmony with his principles. He was staying accountable to the only person he couldn't lie to, himself. And maybe that's the most powerful lesson of all, that real self-respect isn't built on being flawless or achieving perfection. It's built on being real, on being honest enough to say, "I slipped, but I see it, and I'll do better tomorrow." It's not glamorous or dramatic. It's not easy. It requires constant vigilance and effort, but it's rare. And in a world obsessed with filters, with performance, with always appearing in control, there's something revolutionary about simply saying, "I'm still learning." It's an act of bravery and humility. So if you're on that path of holding yourself accountable, of admitting where you fall short, of choosing to grow instead of pretend to be perfect, then you're already walking beside Marcus, not in history as a distant figure, but in practice, in mindset, and in courage. Because that's what courage looks like. Not standing tall on a stage and delivering a grand speech, but kneeling quietly in front of your own mistakes and saying, "Teach me." It is the humility to accept your imperfections as opportunities for growth. He lists the names of emperors, men long forgotten by most of humanity, who once ruled vast territories, who commanded armies, who shaped nations with their decisions. and whose names now slip through history like dust, through fingers, evanescent and meaningless to the modern ear. And then, in the same breath, with striking candor and absolute realism, Marcus Aurelius reminds himself, "I will be one of them, forgotten, eventually erased from memory, just like the rest." But he doesn't flinch from this reality. He doesn't despair or become nihilistic, because he never clung to legacy in the sense of posthumous fame or public admiration. He clung instead to character, to the quality of his soul and his conduct while alive. That shift in focus changes everything. It liberates you from the burden of external validation. We live in a world obsessed with legacy, how we'll be remembered, how big our name will be in the collective consciousness, how many people know who we are. Social media has only amplified this hunger for recognition and eternal fame. Fame now seems just a post away, a viral moment from immortality. Visibility feels like power, a measure of one's importance, and yet here is Marcus, the most powerful man of his time, the ruler of an empire, and he's telling himself, soon you'll be ashes or bones, a mere name at most, and even that is just a sound, an echo. That's not nihilism or a denial of meaning, that's clarity. He's not saying life is meaningless, he's saying stop trying to make your meaning depend on things that will never last, on fleeting fame, on temporary power, on the opinions of others. Stop chasing applause you'll never hear in the grave. Instead, build your life on something no one can take from you, your values, your inner moral compass. It's easy to confuse legacy with purpose, but legacy is external. It's how the world remembers you. Purpose is internal. It's how you live with yourself, in alignment with your deepest convictions. Marcus chose the second, because legacy is a dangerous addiction. The more you chase being remembered, the more you shape your life for the crowd, for external approval. You start making decisions not because they're right, but because they look impressive to others. You begin speaking not with honesty, from a place of truth, but with strategy, aiming for a specific public reaction. You become less yourself and more a performance, a carefully constructed facade. But Marcus understood what most never do. You can't control how you'll be remembered. History is fickle and fame is transient. You can only control how you show up in the world, what you stand for, what kind of person you are when no one's watching, when there is no audience, no praise, no reward. That's what he meant when he said, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one." Not because people are watching and expecting it, but because you are watching yourself. You are the ultimate judge of your own character. Plato wrote, "The first and greatest victory is to conquer yourself." Marcus took that seriously. His victory wasn't over the Parthians or Germanic tribes in military conflict. It was over the temptation to make his reign about power instead of principle. In a world that begged him to rule with dominance and ruthlessness, he chose discipline, self-control, and adherence to a moral code. In a palace filled with temptation, he practiced restraint. In an empire that offered him worship and divinity, he humbled himself daily, reminding himself of his mortality and his humanity. Think about how rare that is, both in antiquity and today. Most people, when given a taste of power, crave more. They become addicted to being seen, being followed, being praised. They want to build monuments, not just of stone to commemorate their achievements, but of image, carefully crafted and controlled. But Marcus saw through all that. He knew fame was fleeting, praise is temporary, the crowd is fickle and their admiration can turn to scorn in an instant. What lasts is character, what matters is virtue, what endures is integrity. He reminded himself constantly that people's opinions were out of his control, external and independent of his own worth. He even wrote, "All is ephemeral, fame and the famous as well." And yet, how often do we live our lives as if public approval is the finish line of our efforts? We work for recognition, for awards, for likes, for retweets on social media. And then we wonder why we feel empty even after we get them. Because applause can't fill you internally. It can only distract you from the work that actually builds peace and fulfillment from within. Carl Jung said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." And that's what Marcus did in Meditations. Not perfectly, not all at once, but persistently. Day by day, entry by entry, he faced himself, his flaws, his fears, his frustrations, not as a figure of grandeur, but as a man trying to live well, not to impress, but to align himself with his principles. He knew his name would fade from the minds of generations, but his soul, that was his responsibility. That was his masterpiece, forged in the fires of self-examination. And that's why, even though he knew he'd be forgotten, he wrote anyway, not to be remembered by the world, but to remember himself, to keep himself centered, aligned, awake to his purpose and values. Socrates was once told that the oracle at Delphi proclaimed him the wisest man in Athens, but Socrates didn't let it inflate his ego or rest on his laurels. He doubled down on his quest for truth, for inner clarity. He said, "I know that I know nothing," a profound statement of humility and openness, because the goal was never to appear wise to others, it was to live wisely in practice. The same thread runs through Marcus. He didn't care about appearing moral to the Roman Senate or the populace. He cared about becoming moral through his actions and choices. And that's the invitation Stoicism extends to us, not to chase the spotlight of fame or external validation, but to light our own path with the flame of virtue. To measure ourselves not by external applause, but by internal alignment. The questions he asked himself are the ones we should ask. Did I live today in a way that reflects my values? Did I hold myself to the standard I claim to believe in? Did I do the right thing even when no one clapped? These are the questions that matter, for they gauge true worth. Legacy is loud. It demands attention and seeks public acclaim. Character is quiet. It is forged in solitude and revealed in small, unseen actions. Legacy wants a crowd. Character just needs a conscience. Legacy asks, "What will they say about me?" Character asks, "What do I know to be true?" And here's the irony. If you live for legacy, chase it with every fiber of your being, you may lose both legacy and character. But if you live for character, focusing on your integrity and virtue, sometimes legacy follows anyway, quietly, naturally, as a side effect, not a goal. It is the natural outcome of a well-lived life. Marcus didn't make decisions with history in mind or how future generations would judge him. He made decisions with virtue in mind. And because of that, history remembers him, not for his conquests alone, but for his convictions. He reminds us that the size of your stage doesn't determine the strength of your soul. You don't need to lead an empire to live with integrity. You don't need a title to practice humility. You don't need 1,000,000 followers to be grounded in purpose. You just need to decide what matters and live like it does, to align your actions with your values. So what matters to you? Fame or peace? Recognition or integrity? What do you want your days to stand for, to represent? Because in the end, your life isn't built in grand gestures or dramatic moments. It's built in the small choices you make when no one's watching. It's built when you return the shopping cart in the parking lot, when you admit you were wrong in a private conversation, when you stay honest even when it costs you something, when you keep your word not for credit, but because it's who you are. Marcus wrote, "If someone can prove me wrong and show me my mistake, I will gladly change." That's the mark of a man who isn't obsessed with looking right, with appearing infallible, but with being real and truthful. And that's what makes his wisdom last. Not that he had all the answers or a perfect philosophical system, but that he kept asking the right questions. Questions like, what kind of person do I want to be? Am I living like it? What am I clinging to? That doesn't matter. He knew that death would come, sweeping all before it. That time would erase his name from the minds of future generations, that the Roman Empire would eventually fall, like all empires. But he also knew that the human soul is timeless, that courage is timeless, that discipline, humility, compassion, and reason, they echo far beyond any headline or statue. Their impact transcends the ephemeral. So maybe the goal isn't to be remembered by the world. Maybe the goal is to be real, to live in such a way that even if no one ever tells your story, the people you touched will never forget how you made them feel. Not because you were impressive or powerful, but because you were grounded, honest, present. Don't build your life chasing applause you'll never hear. Build it on values you'll never regret. Let your name fade. Let your face disappear. Let history forget you, but let your soul remain intact. Let your integrity whisper louder than the world shouts. And when you lie down at the end of the day, may your peace be your legacy. May the quiet contentment of a virtuous life be the ultimate measure of your existence. Floods, wars, death, betrayal. Marcus endured all of it with remarkable composure and persistence. He faced plagues that decimated the empire, wiping out vast populations and causing widespread suffering. He dealt with rebellions that tested his reign, challenging his authority and the stability of his empire. He experienced the bitter betrayal of trusted generals and advisors, a sharp reminder of human frailty and ambition. He endured the unspeakable loss of children, one after another, a grief that would break most parents. He lived with the constant presence of death, not as a metaphor or a distant concept, but as a literal companion, both in battle and in the daily reality of a plagued empire. And still he kept showing up, day after day, page after page. He returned to his journal, to his discipline, to his principles. Why? Because he understood something we often forget in our quest to avoid suffering. The storms outside don't have to become storms inside. External chaos does not have to dictate your inner state. He didn't let heartbreak make him bitter or resentful. Instead, he let it make him better, stronger, more compassionate, and there's a massive difference between the two. Bitterness is easy. It's an automatic defensive response. When life hurts you, when people disappoint you, when the world feels unfair, it's natural to armor up, to close off, to see everything through the lens of pain and resentment. But Marcus knew that once you let pain twist your perspective, once you allow suffering to corrupt your view of the world, you lose the only thing you truly control, your character. Your inner moral compass becomes distorted. So instead, he chose the harder path, the Stoic path. He didn't suppress the pain or pretend it didn't exist. He studied it. He examined it with rational detachment. He let it shape him without defining him, without allowing it to become the sole identity of his being. He wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That wasn't theory or a mere philosophical postulation. That was survival. Because outside events were a relentless flood. Plagues, civil unrest, war on multiple borders, personal tragedy after tragedy. Marcus could have collapsed under the weight of it all. He could have turned cruel, embracing tyranny. He could have become detached and indifferent. He could have become cynical, losing faith in humanity. But he didn't. He chose to keep showing up fully, honestly, even when it broke his heart. He lost his children and still reminded himself not to expect permanence or to cling to what is fleeting. "You could leave life right now," he wrote. "Let that determine what you do and say and think." This wasn't morbid or a celebration of death. It was grounding. It was his way of staying connected to what mattered most in the brief span of life. Because when death sits close, when mortality is a tangible reality, you stop wasting time on trivialities. You stop taking people for granted. You stop running from discomfort and start showing up for life exactly as it is. Even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. He didn't glamorize suffering, but he didn't avoid it either. He believed deeply that pain is a teacher, not a punishment. It is a lesson in what we value, revealing our true priorities. It is a mirror of our ego, exposing our attachments and self-deceptions. It is a test of our principles, forcing us to live by the values we claim to uphold. Carl Jung once said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." Marcus lived that truth. He didn't escape the darkness of his circumstances or his inner turmoil. He walked through it, wrote through it, grew through it. He used adversity as a catalyst for self-improvement. Every line of Meditations is a man wrestling with heartbreak, disappointment, injustice, and still choosing virtue and integrity. Think about that the next time life punches you in the gut, when you feel abandoned, when your plans fall apart, when someone you trust turns their back. You have two choices. Will you harden your heart and become bitter, or will you grow from the experience? Marcus chose to grow. He could have used power to numb himself through distraction, through pleasure, through anger, but he didn't. He chose to face reality fully awake, with open eyes and a conscious mind. He reminded himself, if it is endurable, then endure it. Stop complaining. That wasn't coldness or lack of emotion. That was resilience. It was a refusal to be ruled by resentment. Betrayal? He faced it. Loss? He accepted it. War? He led through it. Every time life knocked him down, he got back up. Not because he was invincible or immune to suffering, but because he was grounded in values, in discipline, in the constant reminder that this moment, no matter how painful, was shaping him for the better. It was an opportunity for transformation. There's a reason we still read Marcus 2,000 years later. Not because he was perfect or achieved some superhuman feat, but because he kept going, kept learning, kept loving virtue more than comfort or ease. When the Antonine Plague ravaged the empire, he didn't flee to safety or abandon his post. He stayed, served, led. Even as death swept through the population, even as his own health declined, he chose duty, chose presence, chose purpose. That's what showing up looks like in the face of adversity, and we're not talking about grand gestures that make headlines. Showing up isn't always dramatic or public. Sometimes it means simply getting out of bed when you don't want to. Writing the truth when it scares you. Being kind when your heart is still broken. Owning your emotions instead of unloading them on others. Choosing the next right thing when everything feels wrong. Showing up isn't about being unshakable by external events. It's about being committed. Committed to growth, committed to your principles, committed to living with clarity even in chaos. Aristotle once said, "We are what we repeatedly do." Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. Marcus made showing up a habit. Not a one-time act of bravery, but a repeated discipline. A decision made each day not to give up, not to numb out from reality, not to let bitterness take root in his heart. He chose to believe that life was still worth showing up for, even when it broke him, especially when it broke him, because he understood its transforming power, because heartbreak doesn't have to end you. It can open you to deeper compassion and understanding. It can soften the ego, breaking down barriers. It can expand the soul, making you more capacious. It can clarify what matters, revealing your true priorities. Pain has that power if you let it teach you. Socrates, even on trial for his life, refused to abandon his principles. He didn't beg for mercy, didn't flatter his judges, didn't sell out his convictions. He stood in truth, calmly, firmly, fully present, because like Marcus, he understood. Your circumstances don't define your strength, your choices do. The Stoics never promised comfort or a life free from suffering. They promised clarity and the tools to navigate adversity. And clarity begins when you stop asking, "Why me?" and start asking, "What now?" Marcus faced unspeakable loss, and instead of collapsing, he wrote. Instead of hiding, he led. Instead of turning cold, he turned inward. He wasn't pretending to be okay. He was practicing being unbroken. That's real strength. Not pretending life is fine, but choosing to live fully anyway, despite the pain. When everything feels like it's falling apart, your relationships are strained, your career is in jeopardy, your sense of identity is shaken. You have one power no one can take from you, the power to stay engaged, not with perfection, because that's unrealistic, but with presence, to keep showing up, to breathe through the discomfort, to reflect on your responses, to act from virtue instead of pain or impulse. Marcus could have written angry books, venting his frustration with the world. He could have used his position to rewrite the narrative, to blame others, to justify himself. But instead, he wrote meditations, not for glory, not for sympathy, but for self-correction, for realignment, for remembering what mattered to him most. He asked himself over and over, what is in my control? Because that question was his anchor in the storm of imperial life, and it can be yours too. No matter what you're facing, betrayal, loss, heartbreak, disappointment, you have a choice. Will you let it close your heart and make you cynical, or will it deepen your character and make you more resilient? Bitterness is easy. Just stop caring. Build walls, expect the worst. But that's not strength. That's fear in disguise, a defensive mechanism. Real strength is vulnerability with discipline. It's saying, yes, I've been hurt. Yes, I feel lost, but I still choose to love, still choose to lead, still choose to live. Not perfectly, not without flaw, but honestly. So when life knocks the breath out of you, remember Marcus. Remember the emperor who cried in silence, who wrote to himself in grief and chose action when retreat was easier. He showed up for life, even when it was breaking him. And that choice, that daily, humble, human choice, is what made him great. Not the throne, not the power, not the empire, but the quiet decision to keep his heart open when the world tried to shut it. You have that same power. You can keep showing up, not for the world's approval, not for external recognition, but for your own evolution, for the person you're becoming through the struggle, for the peace that waits on the other side of persistence. Let pain shape you, not define you. Let heartbreak refine you, not harden you. And let Marcus remind you that being broken doesn't mean you're done. It means you're being rebuilt. Wiser, clearer, deeper. So stand up, show up, even now, especially now when the challenges seem greatest. Your coworker, your ex, that driver who cut you off, they're not blocks in your path, they're the path itself. It doesn't always feel that way. It feels like they're interruptions, obstacles, roadblocks to your peace and progress. The coworker who micromanages and constantly criticizes. The ex who left things unresolved and still haunts your thoughts. The stranger who disrespects you with a horn blast or a finger in traffic. You tell yourself, if they weren't in the way, I'd be fine. But Marcus Aurelius reminds us, they are the way, they are the very material of your growth. He wrote, people are your proper occupation, not your distraction from what you want to achieve. Not your excuse for failing to maintain your composure, but your work, not to fix them or change their behavior, not to judge them or condemn them, but to meet them as tests of your own discipline, your kindness, your values. That's the part we miss. We think growth happens in solitude, in silence, on mountaintops, and on meditation pillows. And while these spaces are valuable, they are not the sole arenas for true transformation. It's easy to be calm when no one's annoying you. It's easy to be kind when no one's triggering you. The real test, the real measure of who you are, is how you respond to the people who challenge your ego, your patience, your expectations. Marcus knew this because he lived it daily. He wasn't journaling from a monastery, shielded from the world's strife. He was writing while leading armies into battle, while managing senators who were often scheming, while grieving lost children and navigating betrayals in his court. Every day, people pulled at his energy, tested his integrity, demanded his time, and instead of resenting them or pushing them away, he used them as mirrors for self-examination, as reminders of his principles, as practice in applying Stoic wisdom. He wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." When he said that, he wasn't just talking about illness or misfortune. He was talking about people too, because nothing triggers us faster than other people. They push our buttons, they stir our insecurities, they reflect the parts of us we haven't fully mastered or integrated. But if you let them, if you view them through the Stoic lens, they also reveal your growth, your gaps in self-mastery, and your capacity for grace. Let's be honest, it's easy to love humanity in theory. It's the abstract concept of people that we find charming. It's people in real life who make it hard. The friend who flakes on plans, the boss who criticizes unfairly, the parent who never seems satisfied. And yet, these are the moments that define you, not just as a Stoic, but as a human being. Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." That's exactly what Marcus practiced. He didn't just tolerate people or simply endure their annoyances. He used his reactions to them as signals for internal work. If he felt anger rising, that was an invitation to study it, to understand its root cause. If he felt superior, that was a cue to check his pride, to reassert his humility. If he felt annoyed, that was a challenge to choose patience. This isn't about letting people walk all over you or becoming passive. It's about not letting them knock you off your path of virtue and composure. The truth is, anyone can meditate in a quiet room and find a moment of calm. The real work is staying centered when someone is disrespectful in a meeting, when your ex texts something passive-aggressive that provokes you, when someone cuts you off in traffic and your instinct is to respond with rage. Marcus didn't aim to control others or manipulate their behavior. He aimed to control himself. And that's the only real power any of us have, the power over our own judgments and responses. He reminded himself, it's not things that upset us, but our judgments about them. He extended that wisdom to people he knew. People don't upset us just by existing. It's our expectations, our attachments, our reactions to who we think they should be that upset us. So what if we drop the judgment of others and their imperfections? What if we saw each difficult person as a trainer, showing up to refine our patience, to sharpen our understanding of human nature, to expose the parts of us that still need work? You don't need more peace and quiet to grow. You need the humility to see growth in chaos, in conflict, in discomfort. That means your coworker's constant negativity, That's your training ground for compassion, for extending empathy. Your ex's bitterness, a test of your boundaries, a chance to practice detachment. That rude driver, a masterclass in self-regulation, an opportunity to maintain your calm. They're not obstacles to be avoided. They're the curriculum for your personal development. Think about it like this. You're a sculptor, and these people are the chisels, not because they're always right or intentionally helpful, but because they shape you. They force you to clarify your values, your reactions, your identity. Plato wrote, "Be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a hard battle." Marcus didn't use this idea to excuse poor behavior in others, but to remind himself that empathy is part of strength, that understanding is part of wisdom, and that kindness isn't weakness. It's evidence of inner mastery. Because let's face it, anyone can snap, anyone can retaliate, anyone can scream back. But to stay composed when provoked, that's power. The person who triggers you the most is your greatest teacher, not because they're wise or intend to teach you, but because they reveal your edges, the places where you still react instead of respond, where your ego still takes the wheel, where your principles waver, and that's where the work begins. Imagine this. You walk into work and your colleague makes another passive-aggressive comment. You feel your body tighten. Your brain races for a comeback. But then something shifts. You remember this isn't about them. This is about you, your center, your standard. So instead of reacting, you breathe. You return to principle. You choose the higher response, not because they deserve it, but because you do. You deserve to live untangled by pettiness, unshaken by immaturity, uncontrolled by others' chaos. That's not weakness. That's Stoic strength. Marcus knew the world wouldn't stop testing him. People wouldn't stop being people. Imperfect, frustrating, challenging. So he stopped expecting them to change and focused on mastering his own mind. He wrote, "When someone does wrong, you must forgive him, but not because he deserves forgiveness. The wrongdoer may not, but because you deserve peace." That's the essence of Stoic resilience. Not reactive, not passive, but principled, steady, awake. And let's be clear, this doesn't mean you stay in toxic situations or tolerate abuse. It means you stop outsourcing your inner state to external behavior. You can walk away and still be kind. You can set boundaries and still show grace. You can disagree and still remain composed. Because real discipline isn't about suppressing emotion, it's about channeling it with awareness. Turning anger into clarity, turning pain into insight, turning conflict into practice. Socrates said, "The greatest way to live with honor in this world is to be what we pretend to be." Most people pretend to be above the drama, to be composed and rational, but fold when challenged. Marcus aimed to live it, to embody the values he wrote about. And that's why he kept reminding himself, the world doesn't owe you peace, you have to cultivate it. And you do that in the hard moments. Not in theory, not in meditation, but in real time. When someone disrespects you, when someone misunderstands you, when someone disappoints you, and you don't let it make you smaller. You don't let it harden you. You meet it with clarity, with courage, with compassion. That's Stoicism lived, not just studied. That's what Marcus meant when he said, "People are your proper occupation." Not that you have to fix them, but that they give you the opportunity to practice every virtue you claim to believe in. Patience, wisdom, courage, discipline, forgiveness. These aren't ideas. They're actions, and your ex, your coworker, that driver, they are the training ground. They are not outside your path. They are the path. And every time you meet them with virtue instead of vengeance, you're not letting them win. You're letting you win. You're affirming your values, building your identity, solidifying your peace. So stop waiting for the world to make it easier. Get better at showing up stronger, not louder, not angrier, stronger. Because that's how you reclaim your power, not by controlling them, but by mastering yourself. Marcus knew that. Now you do too. What if the thing you hate is the thing that's helping you most? We don't like to think that way. Pain is supposed to be bad. We are conditioned to avoid it. Frustration is something we're told to avoid at all costs. Discomfort. That's failure, right? It signals something has gone wrong. But the Stoics offer a different lens, a profound reframe. What if the very thing you're trying to run from is the thing that's shaping you? What if the obstacle isn't just blocking your path, it is your path to growth and wisdom? This is the Stoic shift. Pain becomes fuel for your inner work. Problems become practice in virtue. Everything becomes an opportunity for growth, if you choose to see it that way. That's not toxic positivity or a superficial attempt to force happiness. It's not pretending that everything feels good. It's something deeper. It's the discipline of asking, what is this teaching me? Even when you're in the middle of the mess, when the pain is sharp and the frustration is intense, it's refusing to let pain be wasted, to allow suffering to pass without extracting its lessons. Marcus Aurelius didn't have an easy life. He didn't write about struggle in theory or from a distant academic perspective. He wrote from within it. He buried children facing the most profound of human sorrows. He led wars on far-flung borders, making life and death decisions. He endured plagues that decimated his empire and threatened his own life. He was betrayed by friends. He faced sickness, insomnia, and enormous pressure from his imperial duties. And yet, over and over, he reminded himself, the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. It sounds poetic and prophetic, but it's also painfully practical. He was saying, this thing I hate, this thing I didn't ask for, it's exactly what I need to grow. Why? Because adversity doesn't just show you who you are in moments of stress. It makes you who you are, forging your character through trials. Think about the times in your life that changed you most. Was it comfort that transformed you and made you stronger? Or was it pressure, loss, challenge? Almost always it's the hard moments that sculpt us, that reveal our true capabilities. Carl Jung once said, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. Marcus would agree wholeheartedly, because pain breaks the illusion of control, the belief that we can dictate every outcome. It exposes where we're fragile, where our inner foundations are weak, where we've built on shaky ground. But it also shows us what we're capable of, the resilience we possess, what we can endure, the depth of our strength, what we can rise from, the capacity for recovery, what we can become, the potential for transformation. So the Stoic refrain isn't just intellectual or a mere philosophical idea. It's existential. It's a way of walking through life with your eyes open, fully aware, willing to see pain not as the enemy, but as an instructor, a teacher with valuable lessons. Let's say you're in a job you hate. It drains you. It frustrates you. You feel stuck, like you can't escape. Most people would numb themselves with distractions, complain endlessly to anyone who would listen, or bail impulsively without a plan. But the Stoic approach is different. You pause. You ask, what is this teaching me? Maybe it's showing you what you value in a work environment. Maybe it's revealing how much of your identity is tied to external validation from your job or boss. Maybe it's training you to hold boundaries, to find courage to speak your truth, to clarify your purpose beyond the immediate circumstances. The discomfort isn't the problem to be avoided. It's the feedback, a signal that something needs to be addressed or learned. The same applies to relationships. That heartbreak, that rejection, it stings. The pain is real, but it also unmasks you. It shows you where you placed your worth too heavily on another person, where your expectations were unrealistic, where your healing still needs work, and it gives you a choice, bitterness or depth. Will you allow the pain to harden you, or will you use it to cultivate a deeper sense of understanding and compassion? The Stoic doesn't suppress pain. They reframe it. They work with it, using it as material for growth. Aristotle said, "We are what we repeatedly do." Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. And that habit begins with how we interpret difficulty. If you see hardship as failure, you'll shrink from challenge. But if you see it as material, raw, uncomfortable, but essential for your development, then you begin to grow. Let's bring this closer to home. You set a goal, you start a habit, you make a decision to change. But then life pushes back. You feel resistance, you feel tempted to quit. You think, maybe this isn't meant to be. But what if that resistance is the proof that it's worth it, that it is testing your commitment? That's what Stoicism teaches us. Every meaningful transformation is forged through friction. Muscles grow from tension. Minds grow from challenge. Souls grow from pressure. The Stoics don't glorify suffering for its own sake. They just refuse to waste it. Marcus didn't say, enjoy pain. He said, use it. Because if you're willing to sit with it, study it, respond to it with intention, You can turn even the worst days into your strongest foundation. Viktor Frankl, the psychologist and Holocaust survivor, once said, "When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves." That is the Stoic path, not controlling everything external, but becoming stronger, clearer, freer within anything that life throws at you. So next time you're frustrated, pause. Ask, what's the lesson here? Next time you're hurt, pause. Ask, what is this teaching me about myself? Next time life feels unfair, pause. Ask, how can I rise through this, not just survive it? That's not weakness or complacency. That's alchemy, turning frustration into focus, turning disappointment into direction, turning chaos into clarity. Marcus didn't become wise because life was easy and permitted his reflections. He became wise because he stayed awake through the storms. He journaled, he questioned, he took responsibility for his emotions, even when they overwhelmed him. He wrote, "If you are pained by any external thing, it is not this thing that disturbs you, but your own judgment about it. And it is in your power to wipe out that judgment now." Notice what he didn't say. He didn't say you should deny the pain or pretend it didn't exist. He didn't say pretend it doesn't hurt. He said challenge your interpretation of the event, because once you realize you can choose your frame, you can choose your response. You've already reclaimed your power from external circumstances. The thing you hate might be the thing that saves you, the failure that humbles you, the rejection that redirects you towards a better path, the silence that teaches you to listen, the struggle that shapes your resilience, but only if you let it. Only if you stop resisting what is and start using it to become who you're meant to be. Socrates was sentenced to death for speaking truth. He didn't panic. He didn't run. He accepted his fate, not because he wanted to die, but because he believed in integrity more than comfort or self-preservation. That's the Stoic spirit, not passive acceptance of whatever happens, but purposeful acceptance, an active surrender to reality while maintaining inner virtue. So when you feel stuck, angry, ashamed, pause. What if this moment is exactly what you needed? Not to punish you, but to prepare you. Not to break you, but to build you. There's power in that. There's peace in that. And most of all, there's freedom in that, because you stop being a victim of life. You become a partner in your own evolution. And that's what Marcus wanted for himself, for us. Not a life without problems, which is an impossible dream, but a mind trained to meet them with wisdom. So next time life hands you something you didn't ask for, pause and ask the most Stoic question of all. What if this is helping me? Marcus said, we should be like the rock the waves crash upon. And he didn't say that lightly. He lived it with every fiber of his being. The waves in his life weren't metaphorical abstractions. They were brutal, relentless, and real. The ravages of death that stalked his children and his people. The constant war that consumed his borders and demanded his attention. The bitter sting of political betrayal that tested his trust in those closest to him. He was emperor of the most powerful empire in the world, possessing immense temporal authority, but not even he could command the weather of life to calm down. He couldn't stop the storms, so instead he became the rock, still in his resolve, present in the moment, unmoved by the fury around him, because life will never stop throwing storms at you. It doesn't care how good your intentions are. It doesn't adjust itself to your plans or your desires. There's no break room, no timeout, no final destination where everything's finally stable, finally easy, finally calm. That's the fantasy that modern society often sells us. A promise of an effortless existence. And the faster you let go of it, the freer you become. See, the Stoics didn't waste time fantasizing about a perfect life, free from all adversity. They trained for the life they had, for the reality of suffering and uncertainty. Marcus wasn't looking for a way around adversity or avoidance tactics. He was looking for a way through it, a path that would allow him to navigate the challenges with integrity. That's what the rock represents. Not perfection or immunity to pain, not denial of reality, but preparation, the inner fortification that allows you to stand firm. It is the disciplined mind that says, I may not choose the storm, but I choose how I show up in it. And that's where your power lives, in your response, not in the external circumstance. We're taught to flinch from pain, to chase comfort at all costs, to back away when life gets messy. But what if the storm isn't here to break you? What if it's here to reveal you, to show you the depths of your own resilience and character? Marcus believed it was. He believed life's waves don't just test you to see if you will break. They show you who you are, the truth of your inner strength. And when you don't like what you see, that's your work, the opportunity for self-improvement. So you learn to stand still, not out of apathy or indifference, but out of awareness, out of depth. Stillness isn't the absence of emotion. It's the refusal to let emotion hijack your behavior. It's the wisdom to feel fully, to experience grief, anger, frustration, without losing your footing or allowing those emotions to control your actions. And that kind of stillness, it's rare, it's powerful. It's what people mean when they say someone has presence, a quiet gravitas that commands respect. It's not volume or loud assertion, it's gravity, a solidity of being. It's something you cultivate moment by moment, decision by decision, wave by crashing wave, a continuous practice. Let's make this personal. You get blindsided by an unexpected setback. Maybe a relationship ends abruptly. Maybe a job falls through when you least expect it. Maybe someone you trusted turns on you and betrays your confidence. Your instincts scream, react, panic, collapse. But then something quieter speaks from within. Hold, breathe, stay with it. That moment of pause, that fraction of a second between stimulus and response, that's the difference. That's where the rock starts to form within you. You don't have to be flawless or emotionless. You don't have to feel ready to face the storm. You just have to stop giving your strength away to every crashing wave of external circumstance. You don't chase the wave, trying to catch up to it. You don't become the wave, drowning in its chaos. You endure the wave, and you learn that it always passes. You begin to understand that stillness is not inaction or passivity, it's intention, it's presence. It's what allows you to respond with clarity instead of reacting with chaos. And that's not coldness or lack of feeling. That's inner power, forged in the crucible of adversity. Because anyone can explode in anger. Anyone can shut down in despair. Anyone can scream back at the storm. But the one who remains grounded, thoughtful, composed in the face of provocation, that person becomes unshakable. They become what the world needs but rarely sees. Aristotle wrote, "Anybody can become angry. That is easy. But to be angry with the right person, to the right degree, at the right time, for the right purpose, that is not easy." That's the discipline Marcus was practicing. Not suppression of emotion, but discernment in its application. He wasn't emotionless. He felt deeply. But he also knew that emotions are weather and identity is the ground beneath it. If you confuse the two, if you allow your identity to be defined by fleeting emotions, you'll always be carried away by the next storm. So the goal isn't to avoid storms. The goal is to build an inner foundation that's wider than the waves, that's deeper than the winds, that can hold still even when the world around you doesn't. And yes, it will be tested. You'll be criticized, misunderstood, overlooked, hurt, and you'll be tempted to break your character just to make a point, to prove yourself right. But here's the truth Marcus lived by. Nothing is worth your peace. Nothing is worth your integrity. The moment you let outer chaos shape your inner compass, you've lost more than any enemy could take from you. You've compromised your very essence. So you keep standing, not for applause, not to prove anything to anyone else, but because you've decided who you are, a person of virtue and resilience. And storms don't rewrite identity, they reveal it. They show you the truth of your own strength. Carl Jung said, "Only what is really oneself has the power to heal, and healing begins when you stop pretending to be the storm, raging and reactive, and start becoming the rock, steady and unmoved. When you no longer seek control over everything around you, but start developing mastery over what's within you. And that mastery isn't loud. It doesn't beg to be seen or acknowledged. It just is, like a rock in the surf, unwavering, like calm in the middle of a storm, an inner sanctuary, like a soul that's rooted even when the ground shakes. So the next time life throws another wave, and it will inevitably, ask yourself, am I going to collapse into this and be defined by it? Or am I going to remember that I don't have to move just because something tried to move me? The storm will pass, and you'll still be here, unshaken. Your inner fortress will remain intact. But let's go even deeper. What does it really mean to love your fate, Amor Fati? Not just when it's neutral or convenient, but when it feels unfair, when it brings profound suffering. It means stepping into a higher order of personal responsibility. It means saying with radical acceptance, even this, yes, this too is part of my story. Not just accepting the chapters you like, the moments of joy and success, but respecting the ones that nearly broke you, the periods of pain and despair, because the fire doesn't choose what's thrown into it. It simply takes everything and burns brighter, transforming it into energy. And here's what most people never realize. The parts of your life that felt like punishment at the time might actually be the parts preparing you for the thing you were born to do, the very purpose you are meant to fulfill. Maybe that painful relationship taught you boundaries and the importance of self-worth. Maybe that job you lost taught you value beyond external validation. Maybe that illness made you look inward for the first time in your life, prompting a journey of self-discovery. The lesson isn't always clear when you're inside it, when you're enveloped by the struggle. But clarity comes with time and courage, and a willingness to ask, not why is this happening to me, but who am I becoming because of it? That's the Stoic lens, a shift in perspective that turns adversity into opportunity. It's not a trick to feel better or a denial of pain. It's a training of the soul to grow deeper, to cultivate resilience and wisdom. Marcus believed that nothing external could truly harm you unless it damaged your character, your inner virtue. Everything else, injury, insult, misfortune, was just material, raw clay for the sculptor of your soul. You're the sculptor. You decide what shape it takes in your life, what meaning you assign to it. So when the world throws its worst at you, when adversity strikes, what do? You mold it. You reframe it. You say, this will become part of the foundation I stand on. This will become something useful. It's a practice. And like all practices, you won't always get it right. There will be days when you don't want to accept it. Days when you curse the pain and resent your fate. Days when you slip back into old habits of resentment and complaint. But even that too becomes part of the work. Growth isn't a straight line of unbroken progress. It's a spiral staircase. Sometimes you circle back to old patterns just to realize how far you've come in your understanding. And through it all, the fire still burns within you, the inherent capacity for growth and transformation. Remember, every time you say, this shouldn't be happening, you're reinforcing a belief that life must obey your expectations, but it never will. The Stoics knew that life doesn't promise fairness or ease. It only promises itself, its unpredictable, unyielding reality. Your job isn't to control the script of life's events. Your job is to play your role with excellence, whatever scene you're handed. Seneca wrote, "A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials." Marcus lived that truth, so can you. Because the power isn't in what happens to you. The power is in your interpretation. The power is in how you assign meaning to it. And the most empowering meaning you can assign is this: it's here to grow me. That doesn't make the pain less real. It makes the pain worth it, because it serves a higher purpose. And the more you practice this radical, liberating Stoic reframe, the more you start to walk differently with greater purpose. Talk differently with more clarity and less complaint. Carry yourself differently with a quiet confidence, because now you're not resisting life's inevitable challenges, you're flowing with it, adapting and growing. You're not recoiling from the fire. You are the fire, the transforming agent, and the world feels that. They may not understand it intellectually, but they feel the steadiness, the groundedness, the quiet confidence that comes from someone who has loved even their hardest moments. Someone who isn't afraid to be tested. Because when you love what happens, nothing can own you. You're not a prisoner to outcomes or the whims of fate. You're not a hostage to circumstances. You're not waiting for the world to be perfect so you can feel peace. You carry your peace inside you, and you protect that peace not by shielding yourself from life's hardships, but by saying yes to it all, by embracing the full spectrum of existence. That's not naive optimism. That's not weakness. That's strength in its purest form. So the next time something goes wrong, and it will inevitably, you already know what to do. Don't just tolerate it. Don't just wait it out. Take it in. Turn it into fuel. Let it sharpen you, making you more resilient. Because it's not enough to accept what happens. Love it, and let it set your soul on fire, igniting your inner strength. 10. Write it down to let it go. This is a practical, yet profound, Stoic discipline. Why did Marcus journal every day? Because reflection creates distance, and distance gives you perspective. When life pulls you into its chaos, when emotions are high and overwhelming, when your mind is racing with anxious thoughts, journaling becomes an anchor, not to escape the storm, but to step back just enough to see the shape of it, to observe its contours rather than being drowned within it. That's what Marcus understood. He wasn't writing to impress anyone or to publish his thoughts. His pages weren't filled with polished thoughts or eloquent prose. They were raw, uneven, repetitive. That's because they weren't meant for the world. They were meant for him. For the part of him trying to stay upright in a world that was constantly shifting under his feet. He wrote to see his mind on paper. Because when you write, the whirlwind of your thoughts has to slow down enough to become words. The formless flow of consciousness is forced into structure, and when thoughts become words, they become visible, manageable, moldable. Instead of drowning in feeling, you start to find form and order. That's the first gift of journaling. It transforms emotion into something you can study, something you can analyze, rather than something that controls you. Marcus wasn't journaling because he had nothing better to do or because he lacked imperial responsibilities. As emperor, he was journaling because he had too much going on, leading an empire, losing his children, managing war, navigating betrayal, coping with illness. He didn't journal from comfort or luxury, he journaled to survive. And not survive like getting by, but survive with sanity, with clarity, with strength. When he said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events," that wasn't abstract theory learned from textbooks. That was earned wisdom captured in writing during moments of deep inner work. Writing creates that space. When something frustrates you and you write about it, the mere act of putting it into a sentence can reduce its hold on you. It forces you to name what you're experiencing. And naming is power, the power to recognize and begin to understand. Carl Jung spoke often about the unconscious mind, how what we don't understand in ourselves rules us. But journaling brings the unconscious into the light. The unknown becomes known. That's how you reclaim your power. You face your thoughts. You don't flinch from them. You don't distract yourself from their discomfort. You sit with the truth and invite it onto the page. And once it's on the page, once it is externalized, you can begin to see, where am I lying to myself? Where am I avoiding responsibility? Where am I falling into patterns that no longer serve me? Marcus did this constantly. He questioned himself more than anyone else, more than any adversary or critic. Not because he hated himself, but because he loved the idea of becoming better. The journal was his way of sculpting his soul. Every page a chisel, every entry a strike of self-honesty. That's what Stoicism is, not coldness or a lack of emotion, not detachment from the world, but radical ownership of your inner life. And writing is one of the most powerful ways to live that ownership. We live in a noisy world. Everyone wants to speak and be heard. Few want to understand or listen. Everyone wants to react instantly. Few take the time to reflect. Marcus chose reflection, and it shows in the depth and timeliness of his thoughts. His meditations are full of conflict, both internal, his own struggles, and external, the world's demands. But always pointing back to the discipline of perception. Perception, how you see what happens to you. Writing trains that. It sharpens your ability to observe yourself without judgment, to detach from the emotion and see the thought, to ask, what am I really feeling here? What's underneath this anger, this fear, this pride? It slows you down. And in that slowness, insight has a chance to emerge. The Stoics knew the danger of unexamined emotions. Emotions aren't the enemy, for they are a natural part of the human experience. But uncontrolled emotion, that's what destroys empires. That's what ends friendships. That's what blinds judgment. That's why Marcus wrote, because unchecked emotion clouds the mind, and a clouded mind can't lead. Not a country, not a family, not even itself effectively. So he wrote, some entries are reminders of his principles, others are corrections of his own missteps, some are stern admonitions to himself. Others are heartbreakingly tender, revealing his vulnerability. He was talking to himself, but in doing so, he ended up talking to all of us across generations. We read Marcus today because he dared to think through the chaos instead of react to it, and writing gave him the room to do that, the mental space for rational processing. When you pick up a pen or sit down at a keyboard, you're doing more than recording your day. You're excavating your soul. You're saying, I'm not going to be a prisoner of my mind. I'm going to become its master, thought by thought, word by word. Journaling doesn't always feel profound in the moment. Sometimes you're just dumping frustration onto the page, a mere cathartic release. But even that, especially that, is valuable because it's honest. And honesty with yourself is the foundation of any real change. Marcus didn't filter his thoughts or censor himself. That's what makes his writing timeless and relatable. He admitted when he was frustrated. He admitted when he failed. He wrote about being tired, about being tempted, about trying to be good in a world that often rewards the opposite. That kind of honesty is rare, and it's what makes him trustworthy. He wasn't performing for an audience. He was processing his inner world, and in that process, he became stronger. Writing is a way to interrupt the noise, to step outside the blur of life and ask, what's really going on here? And that distance, that pause, is often all you need to see your situation with fresh eyes. You start to recognize patterns in your behavior and thoughts. You start to see what you keep reacting to. You start to notice what you've been avoiding, and slowly a kind of inner map forms, a record of your thinking, a trail of your transformation. Marcus left us that trail, not on purpose, not intending it for posterity, but thank God he did. Because in reading it, we're reminded that wisdom isn't found in some external source. It's built internally. It's carved out of daily practice, of showing up to the page when you don't feel like it, of wrestling with your thoughts until something clear and grounded comes through. We often think of writing as expression, a way to convey ideas outward. But in Stoicism, writing is inspection, a tool for truth, a way to track the distance between who you are and who you aspire to be. That distance matters because it's easy to deceive others. It's harder to deceive yourself if you're honest. And on the page, that honesty reveals your real work. It shows you where you've been acting out of ego, where you've been blaming others, where you've abandoned your principles, and it also shows you where you've grown, where you've paused instead of reacted, where you've chosen strength over impulse, where you've shown compassion in the face of chaos. The page remembers even when you don't. And the more you write, the more you evolve, not in grand epiphanies, but in quiet, consistent clarity, in reflection that compounds over time. That's how Marcus trained his mind to lead, not just others, but himself. And it's how you can do the same. You don't need perfect words. You don't need a system or a complicated methodology. You just need to start. Write about what's bothering you, what you're afraid of, what you're avoiding, what you want, what you miss, what you're grateful for. No one has to see it. That's the beauty. It's not performance, it's practice. And that practice, repeated, builds something priceless, perspective. And from perspective comes peace. And from peace, you move through the world less reactive, more grounded, more aware. You stop saying everything that comes to mind impulsively. You stop chasing things that don't matter in the long run. You start choosing your thoughts with intention. You become more deliberate, more discerning, more disciplined. And not because someone told you to, but because you discovered what matters through your own inner work. That's what writing does. That's why Marcus did it, and that's why you should too. He wanted to be full of love for humanity and for life, but free of destructive passion, of ungoverned emotions that could corrupt his character. And that distinction matters more than most people realize. Because love, in its purest form, uplifts. It strengthens the soul. It makes you better. More compassionate, not needier or dependent. But when love is distorted by uncontrolled passion, by jealousy, possessiveness, or anger, it can become the very thing that weakens us, leading to suffering and discord. Marcus Aurelius understood that. He wasn't striving for emotional suppression or to become a cold, unfeeling entity. He was training for emotional clarity, the ability to feel deeply without being overwhelmed. You see, passion, when left unchecked, consumes. It clouds your judgment. It pulls you out of yourself, away from reason and composure. The Stoics saw this not as a sign of vitality or aliveness, but as a failure of discipline. Not because they were cold or detached, but because they understood how easily the flame of love could turn into a wildfire that destroys both the individual and their relationships. Marcus didn't want to be immune to love. He wanted to love right, with steadiness, with perspective, with strength. That's the rarest kind of love. The kind that doesn't panic when someone pulls away or disappoints you. The kind that doesn't crumble under rejection. The kind that isn't born from hunger or a sense of lack, but from wholeness, from a foundation of self-sufficiency. Most of what we call love today is just possession wrapped in poetry. It's desire that demands affection, that negotiates passion, that overwhelms with its intensity. Marcus didn't want any of that. He wanted something deeper. He wanted a love that could endure disappointment without collapsing, that could exist without constantly seeking validation from the other person, that could give freely without losing its center or compromising one's integrity. Because when you lose yourself in someone else, that's not love, that's dependence. And dependence breeds fear. Fear of loss, fear of abandonment, fear of not being enough. And fear is the root of so much pain in relationships, not just romantic ones, but in families, friendships, even with colleagues. When your emotions own you, when they dictate your actions, you're not free. And Stoicism, above all, is about inner freedom, the freedom from the tyranny of your own passions. Marcus practiced a love that was grounded, measured, still warm, but not chaotic. He understood what Aristotle once wrote, "To love is to will the good of the other." That's it. No possession, no craving for return, just the desire to see someone flourish, whether they stay or go, whether they return your love or not. That's the kind of love that doesn't destroy you. That's the kind of love that actually gives life to both of you. It's easy to confuse that kind of love with being cold or indifferent, but it's not coldness, it's strength. The kind of strength that can hold pain without projecting it onto others, that can see clearly even when emotions rise to the surface, that can stay rooted in values instead of being yanked around by moods or fleeting feelings. Destructive passion is love without discipline. It says, I need you to behave a certain way so I can feel okay. It places conditions on the other person for your own inner peace. But Stoic love says, I will love you without conditions because my peace does not depend on your choices. There's a power in that, a freedom that liberates you from dependency. Marcus wanted that freedom. He worked for it every day. When he wrote about temperance and reason, he wasn't shutting himself off from feelings. He was building an inner structure that could hold both love and logic without collapsing under either. That balance doesn't just happen. It has to be built through conscious effort. And it's built by examining your impulses, watching how you respond when you're hurt, when you're ignored, when you're tempted to react out of pride or fear or longing. That's when you train yourself. That's when you ask yourself, am I acting from my highest self or from my wounded self? The Stoics weren't against emotion itself. They were against being ruled by it. Emotional clarity doesn't mean never feeling. It means knowing what you're feeling and choosing how to respond rationally and virtuously. It means pausing long enough to ask, is this love or is this attachment? Is this compassion or is this control? That pause changes everything. Most people don't pause. They react. They lash out. They cling. They run. And then they call that love, confusing it with mere impulse or desire. But love, real love, has room for pause, for breath, for thought. It doesn't rush you into madness. It calls you into presence, into mindfulness. That's what Marcus was after, and you can feel it in his writing, in how he speaks of others, in how he speaks to himself. He knew that love without control becomes obsession, that compassion without boundaries becomes chaos, and that ungoverned passion, no matter how poetic or intense, ultimately enslaves the one who feels it. So he wrote his way into wisdom. He reminded himself that emotions are signals, not commands. That desire is natural, but not always noble. That even love must be examined, purified, brought under the guidance of reason. This wasn't emotional coldness or detachment, it was maturity. And maturity is the willingness to love without addiction, to connect without losing yourself, to care deeply and still walk away. If walking away is what your values demand, it's rare, but it's possible, and it's worth practicing. Because when your love is clear, when it's not clouded by fear or need or control, you become more trustworthy. You stop manipulating. You stop playing games. You become someone others feel safe with because they know you won't use their affection as leverage, and you feel safer too, because you're no longer relying on others to complete you. You've completed yourself. You've built your center. You've done the inner work. That inner work is what makes Stoic love so profound. It's not showy. It's not loud, but it's steady. It's the kind of love that can sit in silence with you and not feel awkward. The kind that doesn't need to be constantly expressed to feel real. The kind that's expressed most in action, in presence, in consistency. We often think of passion as a fire that burns hot and intensely. But the Stoics saw a different fire, the one that burns steady, the kind that warms without scorching or destroying, that lights your way without blinding you. That's emotional clarity. It's when you can say, "I love you," and mean it. Not because you want something from someone, but because you've chosen to offer something of yourself, freely, without strings attached, without performance. It's when you can walk through heartbreak and not let it harden you. When you can stay open in a world that gives you every reason to shut down. When you can feel deeply but still act wisely. It's not easy, that's why it's rare. But Marcus shows us it's possible. He chose love, but he chose the kind of love that builds, that sharpens, that elevates. Not the kind that drowns you in your own longing, not the kind that erodes your sense of self, but the kind that survives loss, that survives time, that survives even the death of the person you loved. Because the love was real, and real love leaves an imprint that chaos can't erase. So be full of love but free of destructive passion. Be warm but clear, be kind but rooted. Because the rarest kind of strength is this, to feel everything and still choose wisely. And that's what Marcus was practicing every single day. Be one, he writes, not argue about it, not talk about it endlessly, just be. Marcus wasn't interested in appearances or superficial impressions. He wasn't looking for a philosophical debate or to win arguments. He was looking for integrity. He wanted to live in alignment, to practice what he preached, not just speak about it, because he knew what many still forget in their quest for external validation. That truth isn't proven by eloquence or persuasive rhetoric. It's proven by embodiment, by living it. How many people preach patience but explode the moment things go wrong? How many people talk about discipline while negotiating every excuse not to show up for their commitments? We live in a world full of performers, of carefully curated personas, of motivational words that never touch action. Marcus rejected all of that. His writing is a call back to something simpler, something real, a life where your values are visible, not in your slogans or your public declarations, but in your habits, in your reflexes, in how you live when nobody's watching. That's what he meant by be one. One mind, one standard, one way of being in public and in private. Not fractured by mood or the need for approval, not torn between what you say and what you do, but solid, whole, unified. Because wholeness is strength and fragmentation. That inner split between your words and your behavior is a weakness that bleeds into everything, eroding your peace and integrity. Marcus didn't claim perfection, far from it. He was often writing his journal entries precisely because he just failed to live up to his own standard. But he didn't defend his mistakes or make excuses. He observed them. He learned from them. He used them to sharpen his aim, to refine his practice of virtue. Every entry was a course correction back toward being the person he believed he could be. We all need that, the grace to fail and the courage to return, because it's easy to talk about values when life is easy. It's in hardship that our true nature shows. That's when being one is tested. When someone slanders you, do you react with bitterness or hold to your principle of grace and composure? When you're tempted to lie to avoid consequence, do you bend or stand in truth? When your ego is bruised, do you retaliate or remain composed? You don't have to say a word to answer those questions. Your life answers them for you through your actions. Don't explain your philosophy, embody it. Marcus said that, and it cuts deeper than we often admit, because it demands action, not just words. Because words are comfortable and easy to utter. Embodiment is costly. It means sacrifice of short-term ease for long-term integrity. It means holding a line when it would be easier to let it slip. It means choosing what's right over what's easy, over and over and over again. That's the work, not the talking, not the image, but the invisible effort to live as one. And one of the deepest forms of peace you can experience is knowing that you are the same person, no matter where you are or who you're with, that you're not shifting your authentic self to fit in, not posturing to be liked or to gain approval, but standing in who you are without needing to broadcast it to the world. That kind of congruence radiates strength, not flashy strength, but quiet strength, a solidity of being. That's what Marcus cultivated. A life where principle didn't depend on conditions or external circumstances, where dignity wasn't for display. It was a baseline of his being. That didn't mean he never stumbled. But when he did, he didn't hide behind philosophy as an excuse. He returned to it. not as theory, but as practice. He knew that the moment you separate your values from your behavior, you weaken both. You become split, divided. And a divided person is vulnerable to everything, to peer pressure, to self-doubt, to impulsivity, to the endless chase for approval. That's why he kept coming back to unity, oneness, not as some mystical abstraction, but as practical wholeness, emotional, mental, moral alignment. Carl Jung once wrote, "You are what you do, not what you say you'll do." That's a psychological echo of Stoic wisdom. Jung, like Marcus, understood that our lives are shaped not by what we intend, but by what we repeat. The Stoic path is not an ideology to be believed. It's a lived architecture, one that only holds if your actions hold it up. So what does that look like day to day? It looks like keeping your promises, even the small ones, especially the small ones, because the way you do anything reflects the way you do everything. It looks like choosing restraint over rage, focus over distraction, purpose over popularity. It looks like being the kind of person your words describe, not just once, but habitually, consistently. That's integrity, not perfection, but consistency, alignment, the refusal to live as two different people. Marcus knew that the danger of philosophical discussion is that it can become theater. Talking becomes a substitute for action. But the Stoic doesn't aim to sound wise. The Stoic aims to become wise. And wisdom isn't what you say when the spotlight's on. It's how you carry yourself when no one's clapping. To be one is to resist fragmentation, to reject the idea that your work self, your family self, your online self, your alone self can be different people with different standards. That's not flexibility, that's disintegration. And it erodes peace, slowly, silently. It breeds inner conflict, because part of you always knows when you're out of sync with yourself. That's why this line matters. It calls you back, not to some dramatic reinvention, but to small, courageous alignment. Be honest when it's inconvenient. Be kind when it's undeserved. Be disciplined when no one will notice. Be grounded when life is chaotic, and when you fall short, and you will, don't justify it. Don't rationalize it, just return. Return to the path, to the standard, to the truth that lives inside you. That's what Marcus did. That's why his words still reach us centuries later. Because they weren't marketing, they were reminders. Quiet nudges from a man trying daily to become who he said he wanted to be. You can feel that sincerity in every sentence. There's no preaching, no judgment, just reflection, and a fierce commitment to unity. Be one. Not just think it, not just say it, be it. It's simple, not easy, but simple. And that simplicity is its brilliance. Because in a world constantly pulling you in 100 directions, the invitation to be one is a return to power, to inner stillness, to peace, to the kind of character that doesn't need applause to be whole. So choose unity in thought, in word, in action, not just once, but every time it counts, especially when no one's watching, because that's where your real strength lives. You don't need to switch careers to find meaning. Whatever role you're in, emperor or intern, is the perfect ground for growth. We tend to romanticize meaning as if it's waiting for us in some ideal future we haven't reached yet. But Marcus Aurelius didn't wait. He didn't say, "Once I'm done with wars and politics, then I'll get serious about philosophy." No, he lived it in the palace, in battle, in meetings, in grief, in stress. He practiced where he stood, because Stoicism isn't a retreat from life, it's a deeper way of living inside it. Philosophy for him wasn't a luxury or a hobby, it was oxygen, essential for his survival and his virtue. And not because he had the time, but because he made the time, prioritizing it above all else. Because he knew the real practice of philosophy happens right in the middle of your responsibilities, not outside them. It is integrated into the very fabric of daily life. It's tempting to believe that if we just changed our job, or moved to a different city, or found a new passion, we'd suddenly unlock fulfillment. But Marcus saw something deeper. Meaning isn't about location or external circumstances. It's about attention. It's about how you choose to see and respond to your life, not where you are in it. You can be a janitor and have more wisdom than a CEO. You can work the night shift and live with more purpose than someone with 5 degrees or impressive academic credentials. Because purpose isn't a title, it's a posture, a way of approaching your life. It's the decision to show up, eyes open, and ask, what kind of person am I becoming in the way I do this work? That's the question that shaped Marcus's life, guiding his every action. And it's the one that Stoicism brings to each of us, no matter our profession. It doesn't matter if you're cleaning floors or leading nations. Are you showing up with integrity? Are you practicing patience in the face of frustration? Are you refining your thoughts, cultivating clarity? Are you aligning your actions with your values? That's the Stoic scorecard, the true measure of a well-lived life, and it's the reason why meaning is always within reach. Because meaning isn't about escaping where you are to find a better place. It's about engaging where you are, fully, honestly, and with your whole self. So many people waste years chasing the illusion that they need to find the perfect job in order to be at peace. But Marcus reminds us, peace isn't found in escape or avoidance. It's found in presence, in bringing your philosophy into every conversation, every responsibility, every challenge. Viktor Frankl, the Austrian psychiatrist who survived the Holocaust, wrote, "Life is never made unbearable by circumstances, but only by lack of meaning and purpose." That echoes the Stoic truth. Meaning isn't passive, it's created, built, forged in the fire of your daily experience. And what better place to practice than the place you already are? The job you complain about, that's the classroom for your growth. The coworker who frustrates you, that's your teacher in patience. The mundane tasks, that's your training ground for discipline. And no, you don't have to love it all. Marcus certainly didn't love every part of being emperor. He often spoke about how draining the court could be, how exhausting the politics were. But he didn't let that be an excuse to check out or disengage. He leaned in. He brought himself to it. Not a version sculpted by bitterness, but a version refined by discipline. He understood that the only thing worse than a difficult job is a wasted mind inside that job. That's why philosophy wasn't something he did on weekends, a hobby for his free time. It was in the pauses between military reports. It was in the moments before speaking to the Senate. It was in the decisions he made when no one was watching. This is where meaning hides, not in different jobs, but in deeper attention to the present moment. You don't need to abandon your career to live fully. You need to inhabit your day differently, to treat every task as a chance to embody your principles. That's what Marcus did. That's what Epictetus, the former slave-turned-teacher, did. That's what the Stoics passed down. Not rules for retirement or retreat, but tools for living now. When you start to see work not as a barrier to your growth, but as the very arena for it, everything shifts. Your boss's attitude becomes your test of composure. That tedious spreadsheet becomes a lesson in patience. That difficult customer becomes your opportunity to practice presence. This isn't about pretending menial things matter more than they do. It's about recognizing that you matter, and how you choose to handle those menial things reveals who you are becoming. The world doesn't need more people trying to escape their lives. It needs more people showing up for them. Fully engaged, deeply grounded, radically responsible. That's what Marcus modeled. That's why we read his private thoughts today, centuries later, because he lived his philosophy in the pressure cooker of real life. You don't have to wear a robe or quote ancient texts to be a philosopher. You just have to decide, my character is my craft, my conduct is my curriculum. Philosophy isn't just for the monastery, it's for the meeting room, the construction site, the kitchen, the call center, the hospital shift at 2 a.m. Because that's where life is happening. And if philosophy doesn't meet you there, it's not real philosophy, it's performance. What Stoicism offers isn't an escape from the world. It's a method for living sanely inside it. That's what makes it so practical. It doesn't say, run away from your responsibilities. It says, bring virtue to them. It doesn't say, wait for the perfect job. It says, be excellent in the one you have. And if your situation is unjust or unsustainable, then of course work to change it. But don't wait to live with purpose. Don't wait to apply discipline, to cultivate character, to lead with wisdom. Because those things are available now, and they are yours to practice right where you are, right in this moment. This is why Marcus's meditations are so powerful, because he didn't preach from a place of ease. He was tired. He was overwhelmed. He was losing people he loved. And still he asked himself the hard questions. Still he tried to show up with virtue. He didn't need a new job. He needed to stay anchored in his principles. And maybe that's what you need too. Not a reinvention of your whole life, but a re-engagement with your inner life. The truth is, you bring you wherever you go. So if you're distracted, bitter, unmotivated in one career, that same version of you will show up in the next one. The deeper shift comes from inside, and Stoicism gives you the lens to begin that shift. So the question isn't, what job will give me meaning? It's, how can I bring meaning to the job I already have? That's where power lives. That's where peace begins. Not in waiting for the world to align with your expectations, but in choosing to align yourself with what matters, no matter where you are. So bring your best where you are, with what you have. That's not settling, that's sovereignty, the ultimate expression of self-mastery. And Marcus Aurelius lived it until his final breath. Marcus knew he'd be forgotten. Think about that profound realization. One of the most powerful men in history, the ruler of the Roman Empire, commander of legions of armies, the guardian of a vast civilization, looked at his life and saw how small it really was in the grand scheme of time. And instead of running from that fact, he accepted it with complete serenity. He didn't cling to his title. He didn't place his worth in monuments or medals, or whether the history books would remember his name for eternity. He simply wanted to be good while he was here on earth. That's the part that hits the hardest. He just wanted to be good, not famous, not praised, not immortalized, just good. That kind of humility from someone in his position is almost impossible to imagine today in our culture of celebrity and self-promotion. We live in a world where people are constantly chasing recognition, followers, likes, legacy. The modern digital landscape has only amplified this hunger for external validation. Fame now seems just a post away, a viral moment from global acknowledgement. Visibility feels like power, a metric of one's importance. And yet here is Marcus, the most powerful man of his time, the embodiment of authority, and he's telling himself, soon you'll be ashes or bones, a mere name at most, and even that is just a sound, an echo. That's not nihilism or a defeatist attitude, that's clarity. He's not saying life is meaningless. He's saying stop trying to make your meaning depend on things that will never last, on external, transient forms of validation. Stop chasing applause you'll never hear once you are gone. Instead, build your life on something no one can take from you, your values, your inner moral compass. It's easy to confuse legacy with purpose, but legacy is external. It's how the world remembers you. Purpose is internal. It's how you live with yourself. Marcus chose the second, because legacy is a dangerous addiction. The more you chase being remembered, the more you shape your life for the crowd, for public opinion. You start making decisions not because they're right, but because they look impressive to an external audience. You begin speaking not with honesty, from a place of truth, but with strategy, with a calculated aim for public reception. You become less yourself and more a performance, a role you play for the world. But Marcus understood what most never do. You can't control how you'll be remembered. The narrative of history is beyond your grasp. You can only control how you show up in the world, what you stand for, what kind of person you are when no one's watching, when there is no need for impression, no desire for acclaim. That's what he meant when he said, waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. Not because people are watching and judging, but because you are watching yourself, holding yourself to your own standard. Plato wrote, the first and greatest victory is to conquer yourself. Marcus took that seriously. His victory wasn't over the Parthians or Germanic tribes on the battlefield. It was over the temptation to make his reign about power instead of principle. In a world that begged him to rule with dominance and ruthlessness, he chose discipline, self-control, and adherence to his virtuous code. In a palace filled with temptation, he practiced restraint. In an empire that offered him worship and the status of a god, he humbled himself daily, reminding himself of his mortality. Think about how rare that is. Most people, when given a taste of power, crave more. They become addicted to being seen, being followed, being praised. They want to build monuments, not just of stone, but of image. But Marcus saw through all that. He knew fame was fleeting, praise is temporary, the crowd is fickle, their admiration as transient as the winds. What lasts is character, what matters is virtue, what endures is integrity. He reminded himself constantly that people's opinions were out of his control, external to his essence. He even wrote, all is ephemeral, fame and the famous as well. And yet, how often do we live our lives as if public approval is the finish line of our existence? We work for recognition, for awards, for likes, for retweets. And then we wonder why we feel empty even after we get them. Because applause can't fill you internally. It can only distract you from the work that actually builds peace and authentic fulfillment. Carl Jung said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." And that's what Marcus did in Meditations. Not perfectly, not all at once, but persistently. Day by day, entry by entry, he faced himself, his flaws, his fears, his frustrations, not as a figure of grandeur, but as a man trying to live well, not to impress, but to align himself with his principles. He knew his name would fade from history, but his soul, that was his responsibility. That was his masterpiece, the work he was truly meant to do. And that's why, even though he knew he'd be forgotten, he wrote anyway. Not to be remembered, but to remember himself, to keep himself centered, aligned, awake to his own purpose and virtue. Socrates was once told that the oracle at Delphi proclaimed him the wisest man in Athens. But Socrates didn't let it inflate his ego. He doubled down on his quest for truth, for inner clarity. He said, "I know that I know nothing," a profound expression of humility. Because the goal was never to appear wise to others, it was to live wisely in practice. The same thread runs through Marcus. He didn't care about appearing moral, he cared about becoming moral through his actions. And that's the invitation Stoicism extends to us, not to chase the spotlight of fame, but to light our own path with the flame of virtue, to measure ourselves not by external applause, but by internal alignment. Did I live today in a way that reflects my values? Did I hold myself to the standard I claim to believe in? Did I do the right thing even when no one clapped? These are the questions that matter, for they determine true inner worth. Legacy is loud. Character is quiet. Legacy wants a crowd. Character just needs a conscience. Legacy asks, "What will they say about me?" Character asks, "What do I know to be true?" And here's the irony. If you live for legacy, you may lose both legacy and character. But if you live for character, sometimes legacy follows anyway. Quietly, naturally, as a side effect, not a goal. Marcus didn't make decisions with history in mind. He made decisions with virtue in mind. And because of that, history remembers him, not for his conquests alone, but for his convictions. He reminds us that the size of your stage doesn't determine the strength of your soul. You don't need to lead an empire to live with integrity. You don't need a title to practice humility. You don't need 1,000,000 followers to be grounded in purpose. You just need to decide what matters and live like it does. So what matters to you? Fame or peace? Recognition or integrity? What do you want your days to stand for? To represent? Because in the end, your life isn't built in grand gestures or dramatic events. It's built in the small choices you make when no one's watching. It's built when you return the shopping cart in the parking lot, when you admit you were wrong in a private moment, when you stay honest even when it costs you something, when you keep your word not for credit, but because it's who you are. Marcus wrote, "If someone can prove me wrong and show me my mistake, I will gladly change." That's the mark of a man who isn't obsessed with looking right, but with being real. And that's what makes his wisdom last. Not that he had all the answers, but that he kept asking the right questions. Questions like, what kind of person do I want to be? Am I living like it? What am I clinging to that doesn't matter? He knew that death would come, sweeping all before it. That time would erase his name from human memory, that the Roman Empire would eventually fall, like all human endeavors. But he also knew that the human soul is timeless, that courage is timeless, that discipline, humility, compassion, and reason, they echo far beyond any headline or statue. Their impact transcends the ephemeral. So maybe the goal isn't to be remembered by the world. Maybe the goal is to be real, to live in such a way that even if no one ever tells your story, the people you touched will never forget how you made them feel. Not because you were impressive or powerful, but because you were grounded, honest, present. Don't build your life chasing applause you'll never hear. Build it on values you'll never regret. Let your name fade. Let your face disappear. Let history forget you, but let your soul remain intact. Let your integrity whisper louder than the world shouts. And when you lie down at the end of the day, may your peace be your legacy. No dramatic moves, no massive overhauls, just one good action at a time. That's it. That's how Marcus built his character, and that's how we build ours. Not in grand gestures, not in perfect transformations overnight, but slowly, quietly, repeatedly. It's unglamorous, it's humble, and it's exactly why it works. We live in a world obsessed with speed, quick results, instant change. We're taught to believe that real transformation comes from something loud and flashy. Quitting your job, moving across the world, starting a brand new life in one bold step. But that's not how character is formed. That's not how inner strength is built. Marcus knew that. He didn't try to become a better man by flipping a switch. He did it by choosing, moment after moment, to do the next right thing. It's not exciting, but it's real. And that's what makes it powerful. You wake up. You're tired. You still show up. That's one good action. You get criticized unfairly. You pause instead of lashing out. That's one good action. You're tempted to lie to protect yourself, but you tell the truth. One good action. You're in a hurry and someone needs help. You slow down. You help. One good action. These are not the kind of moves that make headlines, but they make a life. Because each one is a vote, a small affirmation of the kind of person you are becoming. The next right thing is always enough. You don't need to map out your entire future. You don't need to fix your whole life this week. You just need to take the next step. Well then, the one after that. And the one after that. That's how character compounds. Think about the way Marcus wrote. He didn't write as someone who had arrived. He wrote as someone still on the path. His pages are filled with reminders to himself. Be honest, be patient. Don't get pulled into drama. Control your thoughts, return to the present. Not once, not in theory, but every day, again and again. That's the Stoic path. Not brilliance, not spectacle, repetition. Because repetition forms identity. Do it once and it's just an action. Do it 100 times and it becomes a habit. Do it 1,000 times and it becomes who you are. That's how someone becomes calm. That's how someone becomes strong. That's how someone becomes trustworthy. Not all at once, but step by step, day by day, decision by decision. And even when you slip, even when you fall short, that's still part of the process. Marcus slipped too. He got angry, he got distracted, but he didn't quit. He returned, quietly, humbly. He picked up where he left off and started again. That's what matters. Not the perfection of your performance, but the persistence of your effort. Because every time you do the next right thing, even when you don't feel like it, even when it's inconvenient, you deepen the roots of who you are. Carl Jung once wrote, "You are what you do, not what you say you'll do." That's why Marcus didn't just talk about virtue. He tried to live it, not to impress others, but to align with himself. And the truth is, nobody sees most of these choices. Nobody applauds the quiet moment you resist gossip, or the patience you show when someone is rude, or the time you hold your tongue instead of escalating. But you see it, you feel it, and over time, you become it. Those are the real achievements. Not the dramatic moments, but the consistent ones. We're told to dream big, and that's fine. But if you want to live with purpose, you don't need a grand dream. You need to do the next good thing and keep doing it. That's what Marcus did, and it's what you can do today, not someday. So start small, stay steady, keep returning, and let the life you're building speak louder than any words ever could. There's something even more important than taking the next right step. It's returning to it after you've lost your way. We all slip. We all react in ways we regret. We all make promises we break, and when that happens, it's easy to feel like the whole path is ruined, like one failure cancels everything you've done. But that's just your ego talking. That's not the voice of reason, and it's not the voice of the Stoics. Marcus knew this deeply. You can feel it in how he wrote to himself. He didn't journal like a man who had everything figured out. He journaled like someone constantly coming back to center, back to virtue, back to himself. That's why meditation still speaks to us, because it wasn't about achievement, it was about alignment, again and again. No matter how many times you get it wrong, you can still choose the next right thing. That's the core of Stoic strength. Not perfection, but the refusal to abandon your path just because you took a wrong turn. Let's be honest, starting is easy, returning is harder. Anyone can get motivated once, anyone can follow their principles for a few days. But what happens after a failure? After a meltdown? After a setback that leaves you feeling ashamed? That's the moment that really defines your growth. Because it's not about whether you fell, it's about how you respond to the fall. Most people collapse into guilt. Or worse, they pretend it never happened and move on without reflection. But the Stoic doesn't do either. The Stoic returns, quietly, without drama, without a performance. Just a quiet, honest course correction. You don't need a full reinvention. You just need to come back to what matters. And you don't need to wait until Monday or next month. You can return now, right now. That's how powerful you are. Because that choice to return is a micro-movement of the soul. It's an act of rebellion against the voice that says, "You've blown it." It's a statement that says, "No, I'm not done." And over time, those small returns become your real foundation. Carl Jung said, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." That quote hits different when you realize it's not about grand transformations. It's about the tiny choices that rebuild your alignment moment by moment, especially after you've fallen out of it. Think about it. How do you build trust with a friend? It's not by expecting them to be perfect. It's by watching how they come back after they mess up. Do they admit it? Do they apologize? Do they learn? That's how you build trust with others and with yourself. Every time you return, you're telling yourself, "I haven't given up on who I want to be." That voice is stronger than shame, because shame wants you to identify with your worst moment. But Stoicism reminds you, you are not your worst moment. You are who you choose to be after it. And choosing to return again and again is one of the most honest forms of strength there is. The world sees success in streaks, in perfection, in big wins, but the Stoic sees success in resets. In that quiet morning where you feel exhausted, but you still sit in silence for 5 minutes. In that rough week where everything went wrong, but you still choose not to snap at your partner. In that failure where instead of hiding, you reflect. These are the real wins. They won't go viral, but they'll build a life. Marcus failed. He got angry. He lost patience. He felt overwhelmed, and he wrote about it, not to shame himself, but to stay honest. He knew self-deception is far more dangerous than failure, so he chose awareness. He chose responsibility. He chose to return, and you can too. Let's say you lost your temper today. That doesn't mean you're a lost cause. It means you're human. The Stoic thing isn't to pretend it didn't happen. It's to pause, reflect, ask, why did that happen? What was I reacting to? What can I do next time? That moment of reflection is the return, or maybe you gave into a distraction. Spend an hour scrolling when you had work to do. Okay, what now? You don't need to beat yourself up. You need to pick the next good action. You need to move not out of guilt, but out of clarity. That's how Marcus trained his mind. He didn't wait for the perfect moment. He didn't get paralyzed by guilt. He focused on what was within his control. Now, Seneca said, every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. That includes the small restarts, the mental resets you choose each time you break focus and find it again. The way you reset your energy, your effort, your standards, not to be perfect, but to be intentional. Over time, this becomes a rhythm. Mess up, reset, realign, grow. You start to expect missteps, not as failures, but as part of the training. You stop aiming for flawless days and start aiming for honest ones. You stop defining yourself by your bad moments and start defining yourself by your returns. That is a deeper kind of power. It's quiet, it's invisible, but it's what makes you strong, because anyone can hold the standard when it's easy. It's holding it again when it's been dropped that builds real character. Marcus practiced this until his final days. He didn't let power distract him from the daily work of returning, of getting back on track, of reflecting and correcting, and realigning his actions with his ideals. So the next time you fall short, don't ask, did I fail? Ask, am I coming back? That's what matters. The return is the proof of your strength. The return is the root of your peace. The return is the clearest sign that you're growing. Not perfectly, but powerfully. Not with drama, but with discipline. Not with a big moment, but with a quiet decision to begin again and again, until the day your life becomes the result of your returns, not your regrets. And that is more than enough. There's another part no one talks about, and yet it might be the most important of all, the neutral good, the kind of action that's not flashy, not heroic, not dramatic, just quietly right, the kind of thing you do when no one is watching, when no one will thank you, and when no one even knows. But it's what builds your soul, holding the door without needing acknowledgement, paying a bill on time, even if it goes unnoticed, giving someone your full attention when you could be distracted, following through on your word just because you said you would. These aren't achievements the world claps for, but they are the bricks of a strong character. That's what Marcus understood. That's why his teachings never leaned on showmanship. They were grounded in consistency, intention, and truth. We've been taught to chase greatness in big moves, but greatness begins in the tiny ones, the ones that feel like nothing. That's the secret. No one sells you. Greatness is boring, it's routine. It's the way you treat someone when you're tired, the way you speak when you have the power to lash out but don't, the way you walk past the temptation to cut corners. That's the real power, and most of the time, it's completely invisible. That's the thing about Stoicism. It doesn't care what others see. It's not a performance, it's a practice. Marcus wasn't trying to look virtuous, he was trying to be it. He wrote to himself as a way to stay on track, not to appear enlightened. And in that honest, unfiltered space, we see the truth. The work of becoming is done quietly, in the small moments, in solitude. The world trains us to chase what gets recognition. But if you live that way, you'll always be ruled by the outside. You'll never feel whole unless someone claps for you. Stoicism flips that. It says, don't live for applause. Live in alignment. Do what's right because it's right, and let that be enough. And it is enough. It's more than enough. Because over time, those tiny unnoticed choices build something lasting. They build someone you can trust, someone you can respect, someone who doesn't need the world to validate them because they're already grounded in what matters. Seneca warned against tying your worth to what others think. He said, if you live in harmony with nature, you will never be poor. If you live according to what others think, you will never be rich. He wasn't talking about money. He was talking about peace, about self-trust, about the wealth of integrity. Integrity is doing the right thing, especially when no one sees it. And here's the beautiful part. It doesn't take any special talent. Anyone can do this. You don't need to be strong, rich, brilliant, or successful. You just need to show up for your values, and you don't have to do it perfectly. You just have to keep doing it consistently. That's where true strength grows, not from being loud, but from being steady. And when you live this way, something shifts. You don't need people to notice. You don't feel restless when you're not praised. You start to feel calm because your sense of self is rooted inside, not outside. Marcus didn't write about achieving some grand destiny. He wrote about doing your job, playing your role, fulfilling your duty with honor, whether it was dramatic or not. He knew the real battle was internal, staying honest when it would be easy to deceive, staying kind when it would be easy to harden, so staying disciplined when it would be easy to drift. And those choices, they're made in quiet rooms when no one else is around. That's what makes them real. So next time you hold your tongue instead of snapping, that counts. Next time you admit you were wrong, that counts. Next time you resist the pull to gossip or to coast or to cut a corner, that counts. You might not feel a reward in that moment, but you are building something. You are reinforcing the person you want to become. And nothing, no paycheck, no follow account, no external validation will ever be more fulfilling than that. You are not here to perform, you are here to become, and the becoming happens quietly. It happens in the way you move through the ordinary, in the way you choose dignity over attention, in the way you return to your values even when no one's watching. That's the kind of strength no one can fake, and it's the kind of power no one can take away. You don't need to move mountains to shape your life. You just need to take the next honest step, then the next, then the next. That's how character is built, not with noise, but with presence. That's the quiet path Marcus walked, and now it's yours to walk too. Not everyone chooses it, but if you're here, if you've listened this far, maybe you're one of the few who will, and that matters a lot, more than you think. So thank you, not just for watching, but for thinking deeply, for being open, for choosing to return to what's true. Thank you for being a part of Stoic Journal. If this spoke to something in you, there's more waiting. The next video on your screen is there for a reason. It might be your next step, and when you're ready, we'll be here again. Same calm voice, same deep work, same quiet path forward. Until then, stay steady, stay grounded, and most of all, stay true.